Lord of Mysteries. Survival from the Secret Doll Chapters 61-80. Out of curiosity, Mrs. Boyankaffe was wandering around this place filled with students and a harmonious atmosphere. The afternoon sun was incredibly warm, and Mrs. Boyankaffe occasionally chatted with students who brushed past her. The students were very talkative, and their humorous wit always brought a genuine smile to Mrs. Boyankaffe's face. Some innocent children and eyes full of longing for the future. Under the gaze of such eyes, even the most hardened heart might reveal some tenderness. There are many people here. Life inside the castle is peaceful, but life here is rather lively. She doesn't really like the hustle and bustle, but perhaps it's not bad here. At this time, Tang was directing the traveler marionette to move his family's belongings packed in the castle to the school. Calligraphy, paintings, gold, jewelry, miscellaneous weapons, the flowers his father planted for his mother. Tang packed them one by one, letting the traveler marionette take them back to the never-ending theater. With Amon and unknown parasites appearing in his territory, the real world was no longer safe. That parasite might even get close to him. If he wasn't careful, and it parasitized someone important to him, it wouldn't be as simple as trouble. Therefore, Tang simply brought his mother into the theater. It's impossible for a parasite to silently pass through the joint blockade of a Sequence 2 miracle inventor, the power of the night, and the power of the system within the theater, right? As for the things in this castle that are worth cherishing, nostalgic for, and of commemorative value, he would also replace them one by one and bring them all into the theater. Anyway, the theater comes with superpowers, and building a building is a matter of minutes. It is not difficult to recreate a castle there in a one-to-one replica. He planned to use this place as a trap with the wrong option. He manipulated the marionette to bury some good things that could experience a one-stop ascension service in this castle. Although it was a pity about this old home that had accompanied him for all the time since his birth in this world, the impending danger still reminded him and his mother. It's better to be careful at this time. Afterward, Tang looked at Baron Ramde. The appearance of the sealed artifact, the never-ending theater, is truly equivalent to a huge treasure. Tang sighed silently, then threw out two more faceless marionettes controlled by the theater core. Then, transferring the Baron Ramde marionette from the sealed artifact, moment of luck, back to the theater core for operation. The distance of the trickster's spiritual thread operation is limited, and having them play a loving family, Tang then prayed for miracles to the theater through the ring of the Master of Ceremonies, interfering with the direction of divination and prophecy before leaving the castle. As for the servants and others, Tang also planned to gradually dismiss them and then let the marionettes come in to replace them all. Marionettes are really a good thing, he sighed silently. Inside the never-ending theater, the entire school was divided into three parts, separated by countless curtains folded and twisted, and by barriers twisted by the extraordinary power of the miracle inventor, which could only be traversed through special methods. Tang stood in the outermost layer of the outer school area. The words, Miskatonic, were strikingly written on the cyan-black gate in ancient Hermes. Magnificent and ancient buildings were neatly arranged in the extremely large campus, and the students who came and went did not find it surprising to see Tang suddenly appear. "Hello, headmaster. Hello, headmaster." The students coming and going greeted him enthusiastically when they saw Tang. Tang did not respond, and the ring of the Master of Ceremonies on his little finger flickered slightly. His figure disappeared at the gate of the outer school area and entered the deeper inner school area. The same school area, the same buildings, but these buildings had subtle changes. But if you don't look closely, you can't see it at all. There are also many people here, but the content of their discussions has changed from what to eat today, in the previous place, to today's divination failed again. In Tang's plan, the outer school area is used to recruit normal students. Mathematics, linguistics, history, and other knowledge that does not involve mysticism will be taught here. The inner school area is used to recruit extraordinary people. Alchemy, divination, stargazing, giant language, dragon language, the ancient languages, acting methods, and explanations of various extraordinary creatures, etc. All knowledge related to the extraordinary field will be gathered here. And the students in the outer school area will naturally have the opportunity to come into contact with mystery and the extraordinary, which is itself a part of his plan. After all, these are all marionettes. Even after enrollment, the vast majority of freshmen will stay in the outer school area for a long time. As for what the situation will be at that time, it will have to wait until the freshmen are actually enrolled before making adjustments. The entire school was divided into 3 parts by him. The outer and inner school areas correspond to ordinary people and extraordinary people, and the last school area. Finally, it is the deepest and most dangerous place. That is a pitch-black world. The black sun rising from the south and the pure white moon, the huge campus built of cyan-black stone bricks seems to have been corrupted for thousands of years. The stones are cracked, and bouquets full of eyes grow inside. The ground is covered with gray-brown unknown vines. Slender ghost shadows patrol the teaching building, and fragmented footsteps can be heard in the decaying dormitory. A pair of blood-stained embroidered shoes move up and down without anyone wearing them. Paper figures send off the dead, and drowned living corpses lie in dark coffins, meeting the bride who was happily married but died tragically at the wedding. In the distance, where it is full of dark clouds, there are taller monsters, like telephone poles, making sizzling sounds from their trumpet-shaped heads. One after another twisted and distorted strange figures appear in the desolate weeds. Further away, there is a huge inverted pyramid mausoleum. This is the Paradise Lost that Tang prepared for himself to digest the potion after he advanced to Trickster. It is formed by the spiritual pollution mixed with uncontrolled monsters and various things the Crimson School area. Tear away the veil of peace and tranquility in front of ordinary people, and let the invaders and students with disguised identities and unclear motives face the deepest fear. But it's not needed now. How about entertaining that parasite? It's not impossible, I'm just afraid that the parasite won't get the point of the embroidered shoes. Well, now that I think about it, the miracles accumulated by the theater are really running low. It should still be able to produce a few more buildings. After all, it's a sponge, squeezing it will always yield something, but the project of mass-producing miracles needs to be launched, and a wave of leaks must be harvested. By the way, Tongzi, go and popularize the historical stories of the red wedding dress slender man to the theater core. See if it can scare this sealed artifact to death. When his trickster potion is full, he doesn't need to play Amon anymore, he can directly graduate from sequence 4. Okay. The system's electronic voice should be more eerie, telling ghost stories is really good. Theater core. Are you polite? I'm just asking you, are you, Po, Li, Te? When Tang arrived, the war bishop had already been waiting in the room for quite some time. Sorry for the wait. Facing the not-so-sincere apology, the war bishop simply nodded at him and then handed him a bag. The bag contained several crystal-clear, transparent gemstones, upon which were engraved countless complex, mysterious, three-dimensional, and difficult-to-describe symbolic signs and magical identifiers. Among these symbolic signs were incomplete eyes without pupils and incomplete twisted lines. Together, they imprinted certain mysteries of the seer pathway's high sequences, belonging to the Fool's portion of mystical symbols. Something seemed to reside within the gemstones. If one looked closely, one could see clusters of what looked like dead, dried-up worms, and just seeing them would cause one to lose control of their mind, as if witnessing fragments of forgotten history surging forth madly. This is a charm provided by the theater, capable of borrowing spirituality from your past self, quickly restoring your own spiritual state and maintaining your peak condition. You must grasp the time well, the war bishop calmly reminded him. The yesterday once more charm was not easy to make, especially for a miracle inventor who had already died and become a sealed artifact. The dead spirit worms it had stored were almost completely depleted. Tang nodded and then placed the war bishop's marionette into the system's warehouse. Of course, he could not control this marionette. If he forcibly manipulated it across levels, the divine contamination of sequence 3 would instead use the spirit thread to turn him into a little fool. But controlling this marionette was not Tang's purpose. Theoretically speaking, the system's warehouse was perfect. It could automatically derive various rules to seal the internal sealed artifacts and miraculous items, and even the negative effects of uniqueness would be firmly locked within. As long as a sealing method existed, The various sealing conditions simulated by the system would perfectly match, thereby achieving the seal. And apart from living creatures, it could fit anything else inside. The essence of a marionette was already that of a dead person. Putting a dead person into the warehouse, even if it was a marionette, would be firmly sealed by various restrictions, and even a marionettist could not control it across the system layer. For Tang, he could handle marionnettists of the same pathway with ease, stuffing their marionettes into the system's warehouse. Apart from the item slot limitations, he could completely deprive the marionettist of any marionettes to control. This was equally effective against the theater's marionettes, but now, the system had lifted some of the restrictions in the warehouse, allowing the theater's core to still remotely control the marionettes inside. The Sequence 3 demigod marionette was still being controlled by the theater, which also secretly bound Tang and the theater's core together. There will be some danger next, host, please be prepared. The system, which had repeatedly tried to calculate and come up with the most likely possibility of opening the observer module in advance, said. Having the telescope for observing stars, Tang should not have been so anxious. The telescope for observing stars could confirm Amon's location and even grasp his movements at any time. The system originally suggested, host, we can wait until you advance to sequence 4 before trying to open it, hehe, this thing is really a timely help. Tang shook his head at the time, not agreeing with the system's view. He fiddled with the telescope in his hand and asked, indeed, the telescope for observing stars is very useful, but who are the potential enemies we have to face? He had to forcibly enter the world where the observer module was located, and the Amon he had to try to fight was not an ordinary person. The child of the ancient sun god, the angel king of the thief pathway, perfectly accommodating the uniqueness, the enemy of all high sequence beyonders of the same pathway. Yes, from the current situation, it seemed that Amon had not discovered him, and even if he did, he might not even look down on him at all. But a parasite had appeared in his territory, and thinking of the few families in this era who had the thief pathway's potion, and thinking of Amon's inherent nature, it was really difficult for him to completely entrust his little life to fate and the occasional great kindness of devils. With the never-ending theater, he could develop himself stealthily, and with the enemy in the open and him in the dark. Not doing his best to strengthen himself would be like waiting for Amon to really come to his door to check the Chavez meter? Leaving it to fate to decide was the most foolish approach. The telescope for observing stars was good, but its ability was observation, and only observation. For Tang, the telescope for observing stars was not the best choice. Moreover, having information in advance is not a bad thing for me. My advancement ritual involves a demigod and I will leave here sooner or later, so I must prepare a few more trump cards. It would be best if, after the other party thought he had exhausted all his trump cards, he could still throw out a few pounds of trump cards to add to the fun. Never completely reveal your trump cards. The Chinese people's unique habit of hiding something was something Tang understood clearly. What else could the system do? It could only assist its host well and prevent him from screwing things up. Under its big data analysis, even if an accident occurred, it could definitely guarantee the host's safety. High safety factor, low risk, touching return rate, how could it not try it? Of course, it still struggled with whether this matter violated the main system's procedures. But the main system didn't remind it, forget it, never mind, just do it first, and when the main system asks, it can just kneel down and admit its mistake, right? Under the system's prompting, Tang found a chair to sit down, and 3 items were placed on the table in front of him. The yesterday once more charm, the telescope for observing stars, and the mosaic glasses for observing stars. He looked at the sun outside the window and then stretched out his left hand. The ring of the person in charge on his left pinky finger began to glow. Tang looked serious and prepared himself. I pray. The ancient Hermes language slowly sounded, and the ring of the person in charge emitted a faint light. Layer upon layer, vaguely, the ring of the person in charge resonated with the entire theater through the power of spirituality. The will of the theater's core descended into the marionette in the system's warehouse, and began to manipulate miracles. In the system's warehouse, the war bishop with a rigid and serious face closed his eyes, responding to the miracle. The light emitted by the ring of the person in charge grew bigger and brighter, illuminating Tang's body. The theater's core responded to Tang's prayer, displaying a miracle. I pray that my body and spirit can be separated, no longer suffering from the limitations of the body, and able to freely roam the world of the spirit. I pray that my spirit can perfectly accommodate the three things in front of me, so that my spirit can hold them up and bring them into the spirit world. I pray that my body can stay here, my spirituality opens the door to another world, and my spirit can shuttle through it, and can. His spirit was gradually breaking free from the control of his body. The spirit of Sequence 5 was solid enough, but the limitations of his own pathway prevented him from properly manipulating his own spirit. Leaving the body in this state for a long time could turn him into a ghost-like creature, and his body would also die completely. But the power of miracles was escorting him, allowing his spirit to leave his body and still return to his body with the power of miracles. The power of miracles continued to flash, and he quickly grasped the state of his spirit, beginning to use his spirit to accommodate the three items placed on the table. While waiting for the accommodation process, Tang's body also began to undergo silent changes. Warning: opening the Observer module in advance will lead to unknown dangers. Open it. Confirmed. Having broken free from the constraints of the body, the spirit realm was not elevated. Tang had anticipated this. Even in spirit form, the system's voice could still resonate deep within his spirit. The connection between the system and him wasn't just manifested in the body. The bond on the spirit level was evidently even closer. I must sever this connection to unlock the uniqueness of my spirit. The descent of the knowledge wilderness's madness mystery directly flung him out of his body, leaving him in the system behind, thus allowing him to release the system's suppression of his own level. Therefore, if he wanted to elevate his level, the system's binding couldn't remain on him. Tang looked at his body. The young man sitting there had his head lowered, seemingly having fallen asleep. A hazy light enveloped his body, transforming into countless invisible thin lines, binding the spirit and body together, preventing the spirit from truly facing an accident and being unable to return to the body, leading to true death. Host, I'm starting. The spirit stood in the classroom. Tang raised his hand, feeling his body becoming lighter. It was a subtle sensation. No, it wasn't just the spirit's anomaly. It was as if the invisible shackles he had been carrying were being peeled away layer by layer, unmount the burden. The system's voice grew farther and fainter. Tang could feel the connection between the system and him rapidly weakening, followed by the body, already devoid of spirit, slowly raising its head. Something began to take control of his body, swiftly severing the connection between the spirit and body, and between himself and the system. Open black lens bracket violation warning. Unauthorized separation from host. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You are in violation. Please rebind immediately. Close black lens bracket. System. Didn't understand, Simida. Open black lens bracket. Close black lens bracket. The system was attempting to change the binding target. It had experienced rebinding once before. Although replicating it was somewhat strenuous, it ultimately succeeded. And Tang's level also rapidly increased after breaking away from the system. Just as he had thought, the system itself was a limiter, preventing his level from forcibly rising to the point where it couldn't be suppressed, where he would see terrifying things. And this time, without the protection and power provided by the knowledge wilderness's madness knowledge, it truly was a fall to the old days. The surrounding scenes flickered, with intense colors continuously overlapping the real world. This was the spirit world. As another world completely overlapping the real world, the observer level could simultaneously perceive the overlapping parts of the spirit world and the real world. He found that he could easily perceive the existence of the spirit world. Even without meditation or divination, he could still obtain the answers he needed from the countless torrents of information. But this also came with terrible side effects. The countless torrents of information were rapidly surging towards him. Compared to liberating his level through normal means, that is, through the power of the knowledge wilderness, this forced elevation of level lacked corresponding protective measures, that is, the ability to reject the constantly transmitted information and images from the surroundings. His level was like a reader, browsing millions of words of books at the speed of light every second. These words were not terrifying, but merely observing this torrential flow of information was fatal enough. Similar to the madness knowledge, Tang experienced this feeling. But he also quickly discerned that the terrifying aspect of madness knowledge and this information flow was the knowledge itself, but the former was pollution, the level carried by the knowledge itself, with the information volume as an attachment, making it impossible for people to digest it, reaching the ultimate goal of head explosion. The latter was purely the amount of information, which could cause people's heads to physically bloom. The two may have differences, but for Tang, both were fatal enough. Without divine support, he was passive and difficult to resist. He could see the surrounding scenes, color blocks overlapping, information materializing, countless crazy and distorted spirit threads appearing from all directions, layer upon layer, and because there was too much information, one overlapping another, he had already begun to see the specific appearance of the surrounding things unclearly. Seeing this scene, he sensed that his spirit was beginning to collapse, his spirituality was rapidly depleting, and without the connection to his body, if he didn't immediately return to his body, then the only result awaiting him was the exhaustion of his spirituality, leading to the death of his spirit. Without the support of a body as an outer shell to isolate some of the information, the surrounding information was like a tide, about to engulf him. At this moment, something within Tang's spirit automatically emitted a faint light. That was the mosaic glasses for observing stars. Sensing things that children shouldn't see, this system-exclusive item began to play its due role. If the knowledge wilderness envisioned preventing him from seeing some terrifying old ones and dying suddenly, then now its role was to spontaneously isolate those massive information flows that could drive him mad and kill him. The intense color blocks were covered with countless thick mosaics. Tang, who was already a spirit, shouldn't have been able to breathe, but he still subconsciously took 2 breaths. Is it better? It's better, it's better. Tang looked at his body. His body was now standing up, and there were subtle changes in his body, and the feeling Tang got was naturally no longer the same. From the observer's perspective, the system was like a substantial flowing liquid, passing through the internal organs and blood vessels, subtly affecting and temporarily sealing the countless extraordinary characteristics swimming in the flesh and blood tissues. It regarded the body as a sealed object, using artisan to use his body as a foundation and the system itself as a material to create an extraordinary item at the demigod level. Without the existence and interference of the spirit, it was very difficult and dangerous. If he was not careful, this body would be affected by the demigod level extraordinary characteristics, but it was obviously successful. The binding was changed from the spirit to the body. In this way, the system's influence on the host, body, would be reduced to the lowest level, and it was enough for the system to temporarily replace the host's body in order to briefly become sequence 4, body part. With the system as the leader, suppressing the seer pathway potion in the body, the external manifestation was sequence 4, incorporating the fusion of spiritual power and divine power. That belonged to the system, the extraordinary characteristics of the alchemist of sequence 4. Tang walked to his body, the system looked at him, and then nodded. Tang returned to his body in the form of a wraith. The spirit returned, the system relinquished control, and Tang controlled his body in the manner of a wraith manipulating a possessed person. Divinity, he had it. Level, enough. Come on, open the door. Opening the observer module. The surrounding light and shadows overlapped, sometimes bright and sometimes dark. Here is a world that sweeps across the sky, twisting and coiling. The sun hangs in the air, and in the distance, where it should no longer be visible, it twists upwards, the ground enveloping the sky. Countless buildings in Tengen stand either vertically or upside down, and above the sun are countless inverted shadows of buildings, lifelike beings embedded within them like tiny figures, indistinct and shadowy. He looked around again. The ever-present theater had also undergone a bizarre folding, the once three-dimensional theater resembling a flat layer. Host, you have entered the observer module. Tang spoke. Without any connection to the host, the system could only communicate with him in this way. All internal components are revealed. Tang could see the mother in the outer campus, Olsen and the other Abrahams in the inner campus, and countless terrifying monsters in the Crimson campus were also exposed without any secrets in his eyes. Without a doubt, this space was exactly the space he was in after being thrown out of the knowledge wilderness. As expected, this is not a place only spirit-like beings can enter. Tang re-examined his body, and no changes had occurred. He did not allow the system to reconnect with himself, as the system was currently in the best state to display the divine power of Sequence 4. A higher level can always suppress some polluting forces lower than that level. Tang was able to possess the demigod body of Sequence 4 in a state similar to a vengeful spirit, first because the system had no hostility, and second because it could not reverse transmit pollution through a level gap that was too large. However, it was not exactly a vengeful spirit possession. Tang's reliance was not on the body, but on the seer extraordinary characteristic within him that was isolated. Being able to control this demigod body was simply the system's instructions driving the body to imitate the movements of his spirit body. Rebinding with the system, or truly possessing his own body, would mean that after establishing a more stable connection again, the divine pollution belonging to the alchemist Sequence 4 demigod power would spread through the system, or through the state of possession, and reverse pollute his spirit body. Even if there was no connection between the body and the spirit body, it was enough to deceive the observer module without system verification. Although the body was controlled by the system, the body had divinity, and the spirit body had a high enough level. One was his own body, and the other was his liberated spirit body. Both were correct, and naturally able to deceive the silly observer module. Sequence 4 is clearly a qualitative change, and with the divine power, I can exert the power of my own level to a greater extent. Confirming that this method was effective, Tang prepared to explore the rules of this space. He had to understand certain safe rules before he could safely treat this space as one of his backhands. Tongzi, take the things out. Tang waved his hand, and a 3-meter-long sun scepter appeared in his hand. The system warehouse and the system were originally one. After embedding itself in the host's body, the things in the system warehouse would also be regarded as part of him. Extraordinary items at the demigod level could also provide him with a certain divine support. But things that were not completely controlled by the system were not as good or safe as the alchemist's extraordinary characteristics that the system itself came with, which had been completely assimilated by it. The system used the divine power of the alchemist to shield the countless streams of information that could not be transmitted around. Tang waved the sun scepter in his hand and, after confirming the number of sun floats, continued to look around. At the same time, Tang released the war bishop marionette. The war bishop became quiet after appearing. Although the theater had given this war bishop marionette a spirit worm, it was clear that the distance between the two was already far greater than the distance the theater core could manipulate. But the place where they were was inside the theater. It's not a distance problem, it's a space problem. As Tang expected, the war bishop marionette was no longer usable. The theater core could not use the spirit worm to invade this space. Although it looked like it was still in the theater, it had been completely cut off from the theater in terms of space. It's somewhat similar to the spirit world, completely overlapping, yet mutually isolated, but the connection between the spirit world and the real world is very close. Ordinary people, as long as their spirituality is at a sufficiently high level, can also receive feedback from the spirit world, but this is completely impossible here. Completely overlapping with the real world, yet far higher than the space of the real world and the spirit world. Although he didn't know if there were any creatures here, or if anyone had discovered this mysterious space, Tang still decided to give it a code name first. Let's call it Euclidean 4-dimensional space. Low-dimensional creatures cannot observe the existence of high-dimensional life, and this codename is not a problem. After determining the codename, Tang looked around again. He could feel the consumption of his spirituality. With divine support, and after isolating most of the meaningless information flow that consumed his spirituality, Tang quickly found what he wanted from the constantly twisting and rotating world. The telescope for observing stars, you can always immediately find the star you most want to see. Both observer equipment provided Tang with a lot of help. He found the person he was looking for. That was the young man with the parasite on his body in his own territory that he had seen with the telescope before. This parasite was very likely to be Amnon's target. Whether it was cooperation or hostility, Tang had to figure out the details of this person. Otherwise, he would not feel at ease with a demigod wandering around his home. Parasite, someone from the Jacob family or the Zoroaster family, naturally opposed to Amon, and it is unlikely that he will cooperate with him. As long as he is not a fool, he will know how foolish it is to cooperate with this god of deceit. However, before observing, Tang decided to borrow spirituality from his past self once. He let a part of his spirit body out of his body, and then took out a talisman from it. That was a talisman composed of the eye of no pupil and mystical symbols such as the secret line. The yesterday's reappearance talisman, personally crafted by the theater corps, can borrow spirituality from his past self, allowing him to maintain his peak state at all times. History. The ancient Hermes language served as the opening incantation, and Tang saw the shadows of countless historical gaps. He breathed a sigh of relief. The yesterday's reappearance talisman could be used, which meant that the power of the historical gaps could take effect in this world. This also indirectly confirmed something. After meeting some conditions, there should be a way to open up a channel between this world and the real world. Otherwise, based on the images he had seen before, everything was in a state of being observed, and the historical gaps should also be in this state, unable to truly affect this world. Tang relaxed and prepared to borrow power from his past self. He originally wanted to borrow spirituality from himself when he was preparing in the theater, but when the image in the historical gap appeared, Tang saw a dark and gloomy mausoleum. Tang, this is where, in Tang's memory, he had never been to such a place. The cold wind howled, creating a chilling and suffocating sensation. Even though this was an image from the gaps of history, a scene from the past, Tang still felt a coldness spread throughout his body. This was the feedback his spirituality gave him, but his current sequence was far beyond sequence 5, far beyond the level of ordinary demigods and angels. There were things of equal level here, and their power was quite strong. Inside the dark and gloomy mausoleum were countless coffins. Inside the coffins were highly decomposed corpses. They had wings on their backs, but the feathers, which should have been pure white, were covered with layers of yellow grease, oily and sinister, fused with the rotten flesh on the corpses. Moreover, the surface of those corpses oozed with the grease from the feathers. After a long accumulation, it formed a layer like amber inside the coffin, causing the corpses and feathers to stick together and fuse, making it impossible to separate them, creating a bizarre appearance inside the coffin. Unsurprisingly, these corpses sealed in the coffins were still alive. But the countless spiritual threads rising from their bodies flew towards a certain place deep in the mausoleum. Someone was manipulating these corpses, turning them into marionettes. The scenes within the historical void flickered constantly, following the layers of steps, tracing the countless spiritual threads extending deep into the mausoleum. The surrounding cold darkness was like a tangible substance. Tang began to hear illusory sounds of rushing water in his ears, and a layer of thin, gray-white mist appeared on the ground at some point. It spread across the ground, calm and distant, like an eternally unchanging mysterious object. Together, they sealed and suppressed the terrifying thing beneath the brick floor. Gray mist. Tang's pupils constricted. This color, the seal of the Lord of Mysteries? Mausoleum? River of eternal darkness? No, Charm Daddy. Where have you dragged me to? He had never been here before. Tang's hair stood on end. He wanted to immediately end the power of the charm and leave the historical void, but just as he was about to move, the scene in front of him suddenly zoomed in. It was the historical void. Someone was manipulating the historical void? Influencing the ability of the charm. Who? Antigonus. Or someone else? The scene spun, and a massive feathered serpent, seemingly large enough to occupy an island, suddenly appeared before him. The illusory river flowed endlessly, a deep, unreal stream of water. They condensed and coiled beneath the feathered serpent. Without the suppression of the gray-white mist, the surface of the water, where even light could not exist, reflected figure after figure. They had the same bronze skin, medium build, black hair and brown eyes, soft features, but were numb and lifeless, like ghosts. They were Azik Eggers, covered in huge, dark green scales, with pale flames burning in its eye sockets, but with a human face. The giant feathered serpent stood there quietly, along with countless black tubules suspended around it, and millions of dense spiritual threads. Spiritual threads poured out from the island-like body of the feathered serpent. Someone was manipulating this giant feathered serpent like a marionette. Beneath the feathered serpent, the illusory river intertwined with it, yet completely existed in two different worlds, unable to affect each other. Those almost endless spiritual threads crossed the illusory river, passed through layers of folded ripples, and connected to the heights. At the center of the other end of countless spiritual threads, sitting on an invisible object in midair, was a slender figure holding a dark golden, 3-meter-long sun authority staff in one hand and a book made of thin brass in the other. He wore a white, loose wool sweater with slightly short hair, looking very young but with an unspeakable sense of vicissitudes, with his eyes closed. Myself, in the next instant, Tang borrowed power. The power of the charm took him away from the historical void. The Tang, who had been keeping his eyes closed, opened them when that figure left, and looked towards the empty darkness deep inside. It seemed that something should have existed there. "What's wrong?" a voice came from the side. Tang pondered for a few seconds, then shook his head. "Nothing." The historical void shattered. If Tang still had a body, he would probably be covered in cold sweat now. He hurriedly checked himself, and then he relaxed slightly. He was not contaminated, he did not bring anything back from the historical void, only the normal effect of the charm, giving him abundant spiritual power. Host? The system noticed the abnormality of its host and was a little puzzled. Tang calmed the fluctuations of his spirituality. "Tongzi, have you noticed any problems?" "Problem?" Tongzi scanned the host's body, hesitated for a moment. "There is no change in physical condition, but host, did you have so much spirituality before?" The system could numerically display various indicators of its host. Although the object it was currently bound to was the host's body, based on its many years of understanding of its host, it was also very keenly aware that its host's spiritual state was somewhat wrong. Yes, spirituality. Tang could feel the spiritual power in his spirit body that exceeded his own. The yesterday once more charm borrowed spirituality and power from the past self, and the former self would definitely be weaker than the current self. The Mercury Snake and other extraordinary people who liked to gamble on fate restarts, as well as those who were seriously injured, were exceptions. He was sure that he would never have had such strong spiritual power before, plus the feathered serpent, the river of eternal darkness. Could that be? No, Charm Daddy, have you really mutated? If that's the case, the yesterday once more charm has to be renamed, tomorrow in advance charm. Tang pulled out another yesterday once more charm from his spirit body, hesitating whether to try it again. Using the yesterday once more charm in the real world may not produce this effect. If that's the case, then it should represent that this space, the Euclidean space itself, has some special characteristics. This is not just observation, it may also involve extraordinary power in the domain of time. Returning to his thoughts, Tang suppressed the speculation in his heart and stuffed the charm back into his spirit body. Solve the current trouble first. The yesterday once more charm is not easy to make. Even if you want to try it, it must be to maximize the benefits under safe conditions. This borrowed spirituality should be enough for him to observe who the parasite is. It's okay, we'll talk about it when we get back, Tang said to the system. The system also noticed Tang's emotions and closed its mouth. Tang looked not far away, where there was a small town. At this time, a baby-faced knight wearing armor was following behind a middle-aged knight, and they were on their way to the church. The scene zoomed in according to Tang's wishes. Compared to the astronomical telescope for observing stars, Tang in this state could see more clearly what the life like a wraith that had appeared beside the baby-faced knight actually was. That was a middle-aged man with deep brown eyes, his hair neatly combed back, looking quite aristocratic, giving people a sense of majesty. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The system, situated in this space, could also see the parasite's appearance through the body's perspective. Tang signaled the system to cast an appraisal, but the system indicated it was impossible. They couldn't influence things in a being observed state. Appraisal was similarly impossible. This space and dimension were far superior to the real world and the spirit world. Without meeting certain conditions, they could only be like readers, unable to interfere with the story's progression. But this also had its advantages. It's only a shallow parasitism. Tang was like a ghost, following behind the baby-faced knight. He discovered he could clearly hear the communication between the baby-faced knight and the parasite within, although this also consumed a lot of spirituality, but he had borrowed a lot. His future self was so generous, lending out spiritual power far more than several Sequence 5 selves combined. If I really am borrowing spirituality from my future self, then the me who lent out the spirituality must have reached at least Sequence 2, or even Sequence 1. A powerhouse of that level would have a vast amount of spirituality. Lending some out wouldn't affect them at all. Then, expanding on that, could he borrow other items besides spirituality from his future self? For example, the sun staff to complete his extraordinary characteristics? Or other marionettes and mystical items controlled by his future self? Or, for example, borrowing the system that his future self might have already consumed the god of craftsmen or the hidden sage. Even if it was only for a few seconds, it would be enough for him to play some new tricks. Thinking about it this way, the yesterday once more talisman is much more powerful than I thought. Of course, this also required experimentation to understand the rules before it could be used as a trump card. Whether using the yesterday once more talisman within Euclidean space would allow him to borrow power from his future self, or whether he could leverage this power in the real world as well. Moreover, the power of the yesterday once more talisman hadn't reached its peak. The essence of a talisman is to pray for power from a high-level existence and fix the obtained power with materials and corresponding symbols that can bear it. The theater core had no object to pray to. The yesterday once more talisman was also a type of talisman. Praying to himself, responding to his own prayers, just the theater core of a Sequence 2 miracle inventor, without the gray fog participating in the response. The yesterday once more talisman it created wasn't the best effect. Naturally, the total amount of power prayed for from his past self would also decrease. Moreover, there weren't many spirit worms left in the theater. After becoming a sealed artifact, the theater core could no longer autonomously split into corresponding spirit worms. The spirit worms currently used to create yesterday once more talismans were all leftovers from the theater's previous reserves. This also needed to be solved. Should he rob the secret order and capture a few trick magicians to split spirit worms for him to play with every day? Old Zaradul is dead, little Zaradul might still just be an ancient scholar. Noting the calculations in his mind, Tang, supported by divinity and a large amount of spirituality, found that in this close-range observation, he could flip open some information of the person he was observing like flipping through a book. Tang waved the sun staff in his hand, and the spiritual power caused the baby-faced knight's figure to gradually collapse from three-dimensional to flat, like a paperman. Then, the paperman's flat body flipped open page by page, and dense text poured into Tang's spirit body all at once. Of course, he could refuse. The power of divinity could resist this infusion, but Tang didn't stop it. This itself was part of testing the rules. Being in this space, there are no secrets to the things being observed. Like characters in a filed book, major and minor events were recorded in detail. What's this called? Heaven's Door. Note, Tang roughly reviewed the transmitted information, which contained the baby-faced knight's life experience, and then summarized again. The more detailed, the more spirituality is consumed. Even if it's an ordinary person, if you want to browse this person's life in detail, the amount of spirituality required is equally enormous. Tang looked at the middle-aged man beside him. As a parasite, he was only shallowly parasitizing an ordinary person, just to hide himself. He could only see everything the host saw and hear everything the host heard, but he couldn't interfere with the host's thoughts or steal his ideas. This shallow parasitism was difficult to affect the host, but it also showed that this parasite wasn't like Amon. Of course, it might also be a disguise. After Tang confirmed that this wasn't an Amon's clone fishing for law enforcement, he prepared to browse the other party's resume. However, browsing this parasite's information required hundreds or thousands of times more spirituality than the baby-faced knight. The heaviness in front of him made Tang unable to compress the middle-aged man's body into a paper man shape. Under the premise of ensuring that his own spirituality was abundant and that he could do other things, he could only read some basic information from the other party. However, after reading it, Tang's face became strange again. Pal Zoroaster. Sequence 1, Time Worm. Is Tingen so lively? The never-ending theater? Tang squatted on the ground and vomited twice, relieving the dull pain in his brain caused by the exhaustion of his spirituality. A dozen yesterday once more talismans were placed on the table, and the Bishop of War marionette was also recontrolled by the theater core, standing aside and watching Tang squatting on the ground. Tang prayed to the theater, and after receiving a response, his spirituality was calmed. After leaving Euclidean space, the system recovered the sequence 4 extraordinary power from his body, and then established contact with Tang again, releasing the extraordinary characteristics of the marionettist, and he returned to his body, retreating from the pseudo-demigod state. This time's harvest is quite a lot. Host, what's going on with your spirituality? The system asked curiously. After rebinding with the host, the abnormality of Tang's previous spirituality value also appeared in the system's log, and it discovered the problem. The Bishop of War marionette also cast a gaze at the right time. How should I put it? Tang slumped in the chair, feeling a little lazy because of the exhaustion of his spirituality. Something unexpected happened. He picked up the talisman on the table and then used it. The yesterday once more talisman turned into a historical gap, allowing Tang to see the ocean, see the mermaid, and see himself advancing to marionettist. He saw the never-ending theater, saw himself preparing the theater, and also saw the sun staff, saw the knowledge wilderness, and saw himself floating in mid-air. That was himself in the observer position. But he didn't borrow the power from when he was in this position, because himself in this position was full of crazy knowledge, and the power brought by using the yesterday once more talisman would probably disappear in a few seconds. After all, these are all fake. Heaven's Door, one of the stands in JoJo, its ability is to turn people into books and read all the information about them on the pages. Indeed, it's a problem with the Euclidean space itself. Tang mused to himself. Host, system, what would happen if the yesterday once more charm could borrow power from the future? The war bishop looked at Tang, who was lost in thought, motionless, and seemingly playing dead while secretly chatting with some unknown entity. The corner of his mouth twitched, but ultimately he said nothing. The system could communicate with him internally, but he couldn't. Speaking in incomplete sentences, it was truly annoying, making one want to hang him up like cured meat to expand the ranks. Where was the promised miracle? Where was the miracle? The system, on the other hand, completely ignored the theater core's poke, and continued to eagerly chat with its host, or rather, engage in academic discussion. The core ability of ancient scholars lies in the mist of history and the gaps in history. Only things that have already happened can be considered history. The unhappened future can only be seen as a portion of revelation in divination and prophecy. Although mysticism states that the past, present, and future are intertwined in the spirit world, information about the future is only revelation. The future is changeable, while history is something that has truly happened and cannot be altered. The two cannot be equated. The yesterday once more charm simply cannot borrow power from the future. The future is uncertain. Even the most powerful gods cannot fully foresee everything in the future. Using the yesterday once more charm to borrow spirituality from one's future self is no longer within the scope that ancient scholars can borrow. Tang had just used that charm to borrow some spirituality from his past self. The things seen through the gaps in history were obviously different when using the charm for the first time versus the second time. The space-time within Euclidean space is different from the space-time we currently inhabit. Time in that world should be regular and controllable. Euclidean four-dimensional space adds a fourth variable, depth, which is time, in addition to length, width, and height. The timeline in four-dimensional space is like a draggable progress bar, where the past, present, and future can be observed and manipulated. Tang suddenly took out paper and a charcoal pencil from the drawer and wrote down everything he had summarized so far in Chinese. The war bishop's marionette glanced at the writing on the table, unable to understand the words. Theater core. Although both the yesterday once more charm and the never-ending theater were very useful, Tang didn't plan to let this sealed artifact know too much about these core secrets for the time being. After all, they were enemies, and knowing too much meant either becoming a true ally or being silenced. However, for Tang, if the theater could become a true ally, it would, of course, have to lie obediently in his stomach as a potion to be considered worthy. First, Euclidean space is not only accessible to spirits. If the conditions are met, possessing powerful spirituality and divinity, I can enter it. Of course, this requires an essential difference in sequence. Ordinary demigods, or even gods, may not have noticed the existence of that space. Completely overlapping with the spirit world and the real world, yet far surpassing them, the sequence one-time worm obviously hadn't noticed his gaze. In other words, even when facing a sequence 1, he should be able to escape by hiding in that space. Second, regarding the angle of observation, the stronger the spirituality, sequence, and divinity of the observed, the more difficult the observation becomes. Facing the sequence one-time worm, merely knowing the other party's name and sequence consumed most of his spirituality. But almost leaping over levels to spy on the existence of those earth angels, not only did he not die, but he also obtained some information, which in itself was equivalent to a miracle. Although I won't be noticed by the other party, to some extent, if I encounter a situation where everything spoken will be known, or, if you know him, he will know you, I must be careful when I return to the real world. That space should also be able to block this extraordinary ability, but it's not certain when returning to the real world. In fact, if this situation could be resolved, Tang felt that it would be quite a restraint on some extraordinary abilities of the visionary pathway. The coincidences of the writer would definitely have alternative manifestations in Euclidean space. If he encountered 008 or Atom, he wouldn't be inexplicably arranged. And most importantly, the third rule he discovered. Third, through Euclidean four-dimensional space, I can indeed have a certain degree of influence on the real world. At this moment, a marionette opened the closed door and walked in. The war bishop and Tang looked over together and saw that the marionette was holding a flower planted in the school's flower bed. However, this flower was pitch black all over, as if its color had been deprived by some force. The marionette put down the flower and left the room. Tang took the flower, which had turned completely black, and had the system cast an appraisal on it. Flower irradiated by the black sun, %. Host, it has been affected by a high-level power. As expected, Tang put down the flower, then picked up the charcoal pencil and continued writing. Through the admixture of spiritual power, under the influence of sequence and divinity, certain forces in Euclidean space can descend into the real world through dimensional reduction. This dimensional reduction itself also carries high-level power. Perhaps it's leveraging a bit of the power of Euclidean space itself? I need to continue exploring. And, if used well, it's simply an assassination weapon. Higher dimensions can affect lower dimensions, but lower dimensions have a hard time affecting higher dimensions. Isn't this dimensional strike? But the only drawback is that it's not sustainable. The spiritual consumption is too great. Adding the spirituality he borrowed, he can only wave the sun scepter a few times to influence the real world through Euclidean space. Tang stuffed the piece of paper into the system space, clapped his hands, and stood up. He was still busy. That time worm was actually Pales, the future star, Mr. Grandpa Cheat. Then he had to carefully figure out the mysteries within. Alas, the amount of time spent thinking is increasing. He always feels like his brain is about to grow back. No, he clearly only wanted to be a maggot crawling in the dark corners. Speaking of maggots, could Mr. Grandpa send him a few time worms? Seeing that he was just so fresh and ready to leave the theater core. So, what exactly did they do? Not saying a word, it contributed worms an effort, and they were making it play a mute here. You, look at me. The theater core was confused. The theater core was indignant, the theater core was preparing to give up. It was its problem, it hadn't corrected its mentality. Calm JPG. Peacefully waiting for death JPG. Fine, whatever, you guys like it. Just pretend I don't exist. Oh, right. Tang suddenly turned his head and asked, if you eat other beyonders of the seer pathway, can you replenish the spirit worms? The war bishop, who was about to, yes, looked dull, This question is quite crucial. Tang is not an ancient scholar, currently, only the theater core can create yesterday's reappearance charms. Given the limited amount of spirit worms, the number of attempts that can be made is also limited. Unless he can quickly advance to sequence 4, the Trickmaster, and then independently split spirit worms for the theater to make charms. Indeed, he still needs to capture a few Trickmasters from the secret order. Tang opened the system interface and took a look. Task status updated. Task. Open black lens bracket. The acting of a Master of Puppets. Close black lens bracket. Having advanced to Master of Puppets, you have summarized certain acting principles. Please follow these principles and gradually improve the acting content to increase the digestion of the potion. Task completion, 27%. Without high-intensity acting, relying on ordinary acting is still somewhat lacking. You should know that Klein digested the Master of Puppets potion in 3 months. Speaking of which, why is he comparing himself to this Lord of Mysteries reserve? Spirit worms possess part of the power of a spirit body. Bishop of War answered Tang's previous question. If you mean making trickmasters and ancient scholars into secret puppets, then yes, it's possible. After being made into secret puppets, they can naturally control the spirit bodies of the Beyonders, allowing them to split off spirit worms. However, if it fuses these extraordinary characteristics and then splits off new spirit worms, that won't work. After all, sealed items do not have spirit bodies. The characteristic of being alive is simply the activation of extraordinary characteristics caused by spiritual remnants within them. It doesn't possess a spirit body itself, so it naturally can't split off new spirit worms again. Eating extraordinary characteristics only enhances the activation characteristic, it can't create a spirit body. However, if you mean tearing off the spirit bodies of trickmasters or ancient scholars little by little before turning them into secret puppets to make spirit worms, that's also fine. Both methods can provide spirit worms to a limited extent, and both are sustainable. Cutting them open little by little, then letting them grow back little by little, and if they can chant, miracle, a few more times while screaming and howling, it would be quite happy to listen. Bishop of War smiled. He was half hidden in the shadows, and that smile had an indescribable eerie feeling. Tear off spirit bodies little by little while they're alive? Tear off spirit bodies, then watch them grow back little by little, then tear them off again, then grow them back? Tang gave an awkward but polite smile, then rubbed the goosebumps on his arms and turned to leave. He almost forgot that this thing wasn't a good thing either. Trickmasters, may you have good fortune. Inside the inner world, in a spacious classroom. The Abrahams, who had toured the outer and inner school districts and only had the innermost Crimson School District left, were actively discussing something. They were simply filled with emotion about the things they had seen and heard. The vision that transcended the era was enough for them to digest for a long time. Olsen, are you really not planning to return to the family? Eugonia Abraham, a seemingly quiet female Beyander, asked Olsen. You are the heir most favored by the elders. I can guarantee that if you stay in the family, in 5 years, no, 3 years, you could independently manage a powerful sealed item within the family. Elder Holloway even wanted to pass his position on to you. If you stayed in the family, your development would definitely be much better than here. Just a small noble, someone muttered softly to the side, I really don't know what good luck he stumbled upon. A starving camel is bigger than a horse. The Abraham family is, after all, an angel family. Its heritage and history fill every Abraham with pride from the bottom of their hearts. Olsen was also well aware. It's just that. A small Loen noble? Keep saying that to the group of secret puppets here. To that demigod behind his friend, and even to the powerful Beyander who might be a celestial being. They might slap you from the northern continent to the southern continent. Olsen didn't explain everything to these Abrahams. Some things, he knew, and the elders knew, were enough. High-sequence beyonders might not be common, but for the Abraham family, even if their family's demigods had long died out, the various extraordinary items and charm knowledge they left behind made the family members not unfamiliar with demigods. Familiarity means a lack of awe. Perhaps the elders' intention in leaving these Abrahams here was to prevent them from being forever shackled by the family's past glory, unable to see how much they were really worth. The Abraham family is destined to perish, and the idiots who can't see this point won't be wronged if they're hung up as secret puppets. Olsen shook his head with a strange expression and only said, "You should have felt it too. The whispers of the full moon can't affect this place. Just this one thing is enough for the Abraham's travelers and recorders to flock here. With this 0 feet class sealed item here, the Abraham family can't easily betray them. If you want to kill and steal treasures, see if their lives are harder or the secret puppets' lives are harder. Looks like everyone's here." Just then, Tang walked through the doorway and came in. "Everyone, how was the tour these past few days?" Tang's smile was very gentle. As a faceless, he was always able to properly manage his body movements and expressions, making it impossible for people to see any emotions in his heart on the surface. "Very good." Olsen took the lead in getting up, and the surrounding Abrahams also gave similar answers. "That's good." Tang's smile deepened slightly. "I'll be busy with some things these next few days. Please forgive me if there's any neglect." Somewhat polite words, but Olsen subconsciously frowned, then looked at Tang, only to see Tang also looking back at him. What bad things is this kid brewing up with that smile? Olsen felt a chill. He remembered what his friend had done before. A Beander who was traveling with them wanted to attack them and offer them to an evil god, but he was tricked by the other party and fell into, something that could not be described in words. Tang was high above, saying, "How about I take you to see the god Ali give?" while using a stick to poke the other party's head, which was floating up and down, into that indescribable thing. Okay. He was now feeling a bit physiologically disgusted. Although he didn't know what kind of deity the god Ali give was, Olsen's spirituality told him that it was better not to know. So, what does Tang want to do this time? The other Abrahams didn't realize the seriousness of the problem at all. Although some people looked down on this Beander from a small family, they still maintained a certain amount of decency on the surface. After all, decency is also important. Everyone has observed enough. So what do you think of my previous invitation regarding this university? Before they could answer, Tang added, however, as the host, there is one more place I would like to invite you all to visit. As a secret puppet master, isn't the theater, to some extent, his secret puppet? To quickly digest the potion, a tool person is indispensable. Playing both secret puppet master and trick magician at the same time, with the help of the never-ending theater, can also be achieved. Although, he can't compare with Klein Moretti, the reserve of the Lord of the Mysteries, in terms of potion digestion. Facing Sequence 1 Amon and the Old Man, it's safer to enter the demigod realm as soon as possible. Borrowing Euclidean space makes some things safer and more convenient. The entire Miskatonic University is divided into 3 layers. As the surface layer, the outer campus, Tang plans to anchor it in Tingen, using Tingen as a hotbed to incubate a normal university, corresponding to various knowledge of the technological side. After all, this place is too remote. If ordinary people and beyonders are to be recruited separately, a place that is too remote will not be convenient for transportation and trade, which will have a considerable impact. The inner campus corresponds to beyonders, and this part will be hidden in the shadows of Tingen. If possible, Tang plans to cooperate with several Orthodox God churches to a limited extent in the future. Of course, these are all future plans. All of these plans require a long period of deliberation, whether with Tingen or with other Orthodox churches. After all, the essence of the school is a zero-level sealed artifact. If he were a member of an Orthodox church, it would be impossible to allow such a dangerous thing to settle in Tingen. Unless this sealed artifact is within a controllable range, and the controller is a high-level member of a certain Orthodox church, or has a considerable degree of goodwill towards the Orthodox churches. He plans to take the old path of the Moses ascetics, which is the latter. The Moses ascetics were originally formed by several humans who had viewed the blasphemy slate. They worshipped the hidden sage, who was then a non-anthropomorphic deity. Before the hidden sage came to life, the Moses ascetics were a very respected organization with good relations with major churches. At that time, the major orthodox churches had a fairly good attitude towards the Moses ascetics. And the god of steam and machinery had a close relationship with the Moses ascetics, if it weren't for the sudden activation of the hidden sage. After sending the bewildered Abrahams into the Crimson Campus, Tang paused.
System, what's the situation with the sudden activation of the hidden sage?
According to his memories from his previous life, the activation of the hidden sage should be inextricably linked to the activation of the knowledge more.
I don't know. The system also looked blank. The main system didn't tell me either. After its birth, it came with the main quest of recovering the sequence 1 Beander characteristics and uniqueness of the hermit and perfect pathways. Regarding this part of the content, the main system has never provided assistance.
Its greatest feat now is eating a sequence 4 alchemist potion. Tang's expression suddenly became a little strange. You don't know? The system shook its head frantically. It seemed that it really didn't know more about the hidden sage. Could it be that the knowledge more found another insurance? Both the system and the hidden sage are related to the knowledge more, and there must be a very close connection between them. The system wants to recover the hidden sage, firstly because the other party is the uniqueness of the hermit pathway, and secondly, I am afraid that the other party's activation is influenced by the knowledge more.
The knowledge more created the system, so wouldn't the knowledge more autonomously create the hidden sage?
If this is the case, in theory, there should not be such a strong antagonistic relationship between the two, who were also shaped by the knowledge more. But the system comes with a recovery mission, putting them in the same iron cage, using the entire world as a stage, competing for the final victory? The victor becomes the hermit, and the loser becomes a potion ingredient, a component of the advancement ritual, something like that. Tang doesn't know the ritual for advancing to hermit. The content's not mentioned in the book, unless he goes to read the blasphemy slate again, otherwise he can only obtain this level of knowledge if he has a great opportunity. Should he go find Adam after advancing to demigod and use Euclidean space to observe the blasphemy slate? Well, he can try it and see what the advancement ritual of the hermit pathway is. Thinking of this, Tang said, kindly, it's okay, go play, while you can, eat whatever you want, drink whatever you want. System. After Tang finished speaking, he walked into a huge building, where the smell of ink was particularly strong, and students were sitting in it in groups of 3 or 2, and the academic atmosphere was extremely strong. When Tang walked into the librarian stood up and saluted him. Tang randomly found an empty seat and sat down. A young student took a few books from the bookshelf and placed them on the table.
There should be one more dog here. Well, go back and look for it, see where there are extraordinary dogs.
The passages that can be used to enter and exit between the outer and inner campuses, apart from the special passage that the principal can use, Tang currently only set up 3. The first is the library of Miskatonic University. It is said that in addition to collecting many precious books in the world, there are also many black magic books. Open double angle bracket Necronomicon close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket Unosbreklichen Kulten close double angle bracket. Open double angle bracket Book of Ibn close double angle bracket. Each book contains terrifying content that is enough to subvert common sense and clear the sand value. The second is the Museum of Miskatonic University. It is rumored that the depths of the museum hide treasures related to the Cthulhu mythos. Gems from the underwater city of Relaya. Artifacts related to Nyarlathotep excavated from Egyptian archaeology. Body tissues of the mythical creature Deep Ones. The third is still being prepared by Tang. Deep in the Natural Science Academy, the abandoned observatory belonging to the Department of Astronomy.
Thanks to 2 stargazing props, Tang decided that the third way to enter the inner campus through the outer campus would be set up here. For humans, the dangerous ones are not only the evil gods lurking in the dark, but those existences from above the starry sky are the culprits that lead to the arrival of the day of destruction.
Only by passing certain tests can one enter the inner campus from these three places, and become a Beyonder from an ordinary person. As for the Crimson Campus, that's not a good place. To be precise, he never intended to open that place at all. The campus formed by the spiritual pollution collected by the Sequence 2 miracle inventor and various monsters he needed together. The Crimson Campus can be said to be one of the most dangerous areas in the entire sealed artifact. All methods of traversing the spirit world will fail in it, because that is a place where the spirit world is completely isolated. There is only one way to enter it, and that is to be exiled by the principal or the core of the theater itself. Unless the person who is thrown in is strong enough to break the power of the miracle inventor, or kill all the monsters inside, otherwise, just stay in it and wait to die. I told you long ago, don't come, don't come, don't come. The flaxen-haired, short-haired boy hissed in a low voice. Why didn't you listen? Ah, why didn't you listen? Even if it was Elder Braun's order, we could have refused. There was absolutely no need to take the risk. We will be killed. We will definitely be killed. No, rather than die here, I might as well kill myself. That's right, I don't want to become something that's neither human nor ghost. No, 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 no way, absolutely not. Enough, Charlie. The speaker was an Abraham member who looked a little older, but like the frantic Charlie, his face was also covered in a fine layer of cold sweat. But he still maintained the calmness he should have, sternly stopping Charlie's self-destructive remarks. Now is definitely not the time to end it all. As long as we are still alive, there will definitely be a solution. Even if we can't leave, Elder Holloway will be back soon. When that time comes, even if we are still trapped here, Elder Holloway will save us out of the friendship between members of the same clan. If that master of puppets still wants to cooperate with us, then it's impossible for him to let us die here. Without a doubt, he was rational. But the premise for them to live was that they could still be alive before Elder Holloway returned, and that Elder Holloway really cared about them. The cold wind howled through the dormitory windows, and outside the windows was a strange and bizarre world. Countless buildings were shrouded in black. Even though it was daytime, a huge black sphere floated in the sky, like a sun that had already gone out, emitting a filthy and depraved light. But it couldn't illuminate anything. Miskatonic University, Crimson Campus. The layout here was similar to the surface campus they had been in a few days ago, but it was more like it had been eroded by hundreds or thousands of years, and everything had become dilapidated. The friendly students of the past were gone, as if they had entered a hell where no one survived, and all kinds of strange things kept appearing. Outside the buildings was a large expanse of wilderness. Only by standing at the highest point of the teaching building, crossing the highest wall along the school's edge, could one see the distant scene under the dark and sunless radiance of the black sun. Gray straw formed the ridges of the fields, white paper figures carrying coffins walked on the paths, inverted mausoleums, a group of sheep with filthy wool on their bodies, vaguely, those things surrounded the entire school in an encircling manner. Things like snowflakes kept falling from the sky. The pitch-black snowflakes landed on the ground, and a thick layer had already accumulated. If someone left the building, perhaps every time they stretched their legs, they would step heavily into these snowflakes, making a deep pit or a shallow pit. If someone approached at this time, they would be able to smell a faint burnt smell from these snowflakes. Like the embers of the sun when the sun grows old, when the sun dies, the sun has already lost the power to emit light and heat. The empty shell that has lost all its energy becomes the black sun, leading to depravity and death. There was no sign of life here, except for them, as if there was nothing else alive. Things were fine for the past few days. Who knew what caused that guy to attack us? Another female Abraham member untied her hair tie and took out a key pendant hidden in her hair. She was also calm, but there was also the same fear in her eyes. This was a sealed artifact of the Abraham family, a sealed artifact composed of the extraordinary characteristics of a Sequence 4 mystic. This was one of their real eyes, but this demigod-level sealed artifact could not take them into the spirit world or travel through the spirit world at all. They weren't fools. Now, they already knew that they were probably exposed. That guy, without saying a word, threw all the Abraham members who had just been smiling at them into here. Although it was a visit, how could there be a visit that forced people to death? Although they didn't know the situation of the others, The 3 Abraham members who received Elder Braun's secret order to convey the message had gathered together. How could this be a coincidence? He. Here it comes. Here it comes again. Even though he was a Sequence 6 recorder, Charlie's spirit seemed to be on the verge of collapse. This was even more intense than the influence given to him by unknown whispers. In just half an hour, 2 travelers and 1 recorder were on the verge of mental breakdown here. Outside the empty dormitory corridor, a slender black figure appeared from the stairwell. It was extremely tall, but its body was like a bamboo pole, without any flesh on its body. Its limbs were also strangely long and thin, almost reaching the ground. This monster had started knocking on the door after they appeared in the 104 dormitory on the first floor. When it found the dormitory where they were, this monster would break in, and even using the illegal abilities of a sun priest could not completely kill this thing. What exactly is this? Soon, it knocked on the first door on the same floor again. Is anyone there? No one responded from inside the door. After waiting for a few seconds, seemingly because it didn't hear any movement, it walked to the second door and continued to knock. Is anyone there? Then it was the third door. Is anyone there? Is anyone there? Is anyone there? Like a life-threatening sound, each whisper was like injecting some kind of terrifying mental pollution, causing several Abraham members present to involuntarily imagine the scene of themselves being killed by the monster. Until, the sound of knocking on the door rang outside Charlie and the other's door. Dong, dong, dong. Is anyone there? The low, hoarse voice was like fingernails rubbing against iron, rough and unbearable, causing the brain to shut down. Charlie and the others subconsciously held their breath, trying to pretend that there was no one inside the door again in a state of mental torment. They had tried this pattern in the 204 and 304 dormitories, but unfortunately, the time given to them was too short, really too short. But they all knew what was going to happen next. There were a few more knocks on the door. The monster outside the house did not leave. If there's no one, then I'm coming in. Squeak. The locked door slowly opened from the outside. A bony hand with pale fingertips, enough to grab a person, opened the dormitory door. Then, a bald head, with only 2 eye sockets occupying a quarter of the head's size, quietly drilled in from the crack in the door. It was like a piece of paper, and the hand opening the door was just a trick. Now, the next moment, a pure radiance like raindrops suddenly erupted from inside the dormitory. The slender ghost shadow subconsciously covered its eyes with the other hand, making a sharp cry. The 3 Abraham members suddenly rushed out of the dormitory beside the slender ghost shadow and ran towards the end of the corridor. Every time they passed through the doorways of other dormitories, the doors would open a crack. Inside might be full of hair, or hanged dummies, or gushing stinky liquid, or humanoid creatures wriggling their bodies. Every room was unsafe, only the room they were in was temporarily safe. Run up, or run down. This was the 4th floor. Running down would probably encounter the woman wearing the wedding dress. She was too dangerous, really too dangerous, definitely at the demigod level, and must not be encountered. Run up, quickly. The slender shadow, having finally reacted, was crawling on the ceiling, rushing towards them. The monsters within the countless doors were also about to emerge from their respective rooms, joining the chasing horde. First bow to heaven and earth, second bow to the ancestors. As the 3 stepped into the stairwell, the sound of a Suona horn drifted up from below. A large, red, happy character appeared on the stairwell wall, and red candles illuminated the space, casting a dim light. But it was a blood-red light. Blood flowed from the 3rd floor, and a sedan chair floated on the surface. A woman in ornate clothing wore a bright red wedding dress, and even the red veil couldn't hide her vermilion lips and deathly pale face. Hee, carrying a doll, sister carries a doll, goes to the garden to see the flowers, the doll cries for its mama. On top of the red sedan chair, a seemingly porcelain doll sat, humming a song. She carried something white on her back, a skeleton. Sister carries a doll, sister carries a doll. Third bow to the ancestors. Ah! The terrifying mental pollution intensified as the Abrahams entered the stairwell. From the slender shadow on the 1st floor to the bride in a wedding dress on the 2nd, and then the doll carrying a skeleton on the 3rd. These were all sources of extreme terror. Anyone who approached or came into contact with them would have their extraordinary characteristics thrown into chaos by their power, accelerating their descent into madness.
They were all masters of their respective rooms. Next, the terror of the fourth floor was about to emerge.
Run up! Run up! The three Abrahams no longer cared about their image. As long as they could reach 504, they could rest for a moment. Soon, the terror of the fourth floor appeared as well. It was a woman dressed in blue, with disheveled hair. She walked out of the last bedroom. He enjoys his pleasure while I suffer heartbreak.
Only the moon knows my grievances. Meeting is difficult, parting is easy.
A discarded woman now regrets her tardiness. Do you remember the days when we were like phoenixes, happily together? Note. Soaked and dripping, her figure was even faster than the slender shadow, the bride in a wedding dress, and the skeleton doll. She seemed to teleport, instantly grabbing Charlie, who was frantically screaming and swatting at the candles around him. Her rolled-back eyes were pressed against Charlie's face, and she continuously spat out a fishy-smelling river water. Her skin was sunken, and black blood oozed from her mouth, smearing Charlie's face.
Tell me, can a beast in clothes, with a heart of a snake and scorpion, still live?
Charlie's pupils had rolled back from being choked. Seeing this, one of the Abrahams gritted his teeth and grabbed Charlie's shoulder, while the other summoned a phantom book.
I came, I saw, I recorded. The last page of this traveler's record, detailing the power of the Sun Priest, disappeared. Dazzling light dispelled the darkness, the blood, and the surrounding mad whispers.
These monsters seemed to fear the power of the Sun Pathway. They had also discovered this. However, the mid-sequence extraordinary abilities of the Sun Pathway could only force them back, not completely kill or purify them. As time passed, when the extraordinary abilities of the Sun Pathway that they had recorded and stored were exhausted, they would fall into the greatest predicament. With a bang, the door slammed shut. Inside the room with the symbol 504 in ancient Hermes, the three were covered in cold sweat. Another one, Edis, the older Abraham, muttered. They had to take advantage of this break to quickly recover their spirituality and then escape from here. Perhaps we can jump out the window to leave. He glanced at the dilapidated window, frowned, and whispered to himself. Continuing like this would be a dead end. Going down was a dead end, and going up was also a dead end. They might need to break free from the rules of the game here. Even if the outside was more dangerous, it would be better than being trapped here with no help. Unnoticed, the room number of the bedroom, written in ancient Hermes, quietly changed. 504 slowly faded, like ink meeting water, revealing the mottled metal underneath. What was written on it was 404, room 404. In fact, every X04 was an empty bedroom disguised as 404. It was just that they didn't have time to observe these strange changes when they rushed out the door. A hemp rope on the window moved without wind. With the embers of the setting sun falling outside the window, a creaking sound echoed in the room, but none of the three in the room noticed. Crimson Campus, abandoned library. Tang stood on the top floor of the overgrown library, looking at the distant student dormitories, recording something with a pen. As expected, it's still a bit too rough. The red wedding dress, the slender shadow, the woman in blue, and the doll could all be pulled out separately as mini-bosses, but putting them together like this is a bit of a waste. Moreover, this kind of non-stop jump scares isn't very creepy sorcerer. Tang himself had his own unique understanding of the creepy sorcerer's acting principles. The focus of the creepy sorcerer is on the bizarre, the terrifying, and the grotesque. For those three Abrahams, the acting feedback was mostly concentrated on mental pollution, unable to be killed, and unable to escape. It couldn't be considered wrong, but it was still somewhat different from the creepy sorcerer in Tang's mind. This level of jump scare could still yield powerful spiritual feedback, but it was too direct, completely lacking the feeling of horror and bizarreness that comes from closer examination. The reason for this was that this world wasn't interested in creatures like red wedding dresses and dolls. Without the corresponding cultural background, Chinese-style horror always falls a little short. After all, compared to things like axe murderers and chainsaw men, embroidered shoes, dolls, and paper dolls are obviously more interesting, aren't they? Perhaps I should change careers and become a novelist, promoting this sense of horror and beauty to the whole world. When the time comes, placing a pair of embroidered shoes at the enemy's doorstep would scare them out of their wits. Picking up the Sun Scepter, Tang put what he had written into the system warehouse, waiting to continue the transformation of the Crimson Campus later. And his Master of Puppets potion was also being digested quickly. The entire Crimson Campus was under Tang's control. Some of these monsters were acting by puppets through the theater, while others were monsters formed by the corrupting power of the Black Sun of the Sun Scepter. After these monsters were turned into puppets by the theater, they were also under Tang's control. Without more actors to give him spiritual feedback for the Master of Puppets potion, these Abrahams who secretly wanted to be spies had become his target instead. Did they really think that so many puppets were just decorations, accompanying them in acting? How many audience puppets were hidden among these puppets? Didn't they have any idea? Note. Open double angle bracket Village Corpse close double angle bracket. The Wicked Ghost is a Hong Kong horror film. This time, the goal is to determine how far into the future the Yesterday Once More charm can borrow power from within the Euclidean space, and the strength of that borrowed power. The Yesterday Once More charms are limited. Currently, Tang is unable to advance to become a trick master. With an insufficient number of spirit worms, mastering the most crucial and beneficial source of power for him is paramount. If Yesterday Once More is used in the real world, it would at most provide some spiritual support for me. However, the Seer Pathways Demigod Advancement Ritual requires a flamboyant theatrical murder of a demigod, a Sequence 5. Without extensive assistance, bridging the gap in levels between the two is no easy feat. Perhaps a surprise attack within the Euclidean space might work. Tang retrieved the Sun Authority Scepter and, with practiced ease, first checked on Amon's clone in Tingen, then his own territory's old man. Assured that Amon hadn't affected this place and the old man showed no signs of leaving, Tang felt relieved enough to begin his experiment. He remembered clearly that when he first used the Yesterday Once More charm, he saw the Sun Authority Scepter he carried in a book composed of thin brass pages. That Sequence 2, or even Sequence 1, version of myself must have significantly enhanced the Sun Authority Scepter's extraordinary characteristics. If a Sequence 3, or perhaps Sequence 2, level of extraordinary item could be brought over using the Yesterday Once More charm, even for just a few seconds, utilizing the inherent properties of the Euclidean space, directly blasting a Sequence 4 across a layer of space wouldn't be impossible. The inability to observe four-dimensional existence means that the demigod cannot receive any spiritual intuition feedback before the attack arrives. After all, spiritual intuition originates from the spirit world, and the Euclidean space itself has a higher dimension than the spirit world. The spirit world cannot capture information from within the higher dimensional space, so naturally, it cannot provide the demigod with spiritual intuition feedback. Similarly, a demon's danger premonitions, etc., will not work until the attack dimensionally reduces through the Euclidean space. Tang picked up the scepter in his hand. The sun symbol resembled a bronze mirror, reflecting Tang's figure. Within the extremely blurred image reflected, there was also a vague shadow beside his figure. That was simply too blurry, it was more like a blob of indeterminate darkness than a shadow. After the Sun Authority Scepter integrated the extraordinary powers of all-knowing and all-powerful 5 pathways, it produced uncontrollable and incomprehensible mutations. The normal sunlight transformed into the aging and dying black sun. All spiritual beings enveloped by the black sun would generate shadows under the sunlight. These shadows were a reflection of themselves, but more inclined towards the dark side. Subsequently, these shadows would activate, influenced by the manipulator's power, causing them to separate from the main body. Then, using the scholar's extraordinary power, they would simulate the main body's characteristics and combat skills. The Black Knight would corrupt and strengthen them, while the Wind Blessed would make the main body and shadow extreme and mad, ultimately leading to either the shadow killing its master or the master killing their shadow, followed by power exhaustion. After all, the shadow can also be considered a part of him. This involves the influence of various extraordinary elements, and once those shadows truly kill their master, they will also replace the master's position, becoming a constantly maddening and terrifying source of pollution. It will become a new black sun, and any spiritual being entering its territory will repeat the above process until it kills those spiritual beings or is killed by others. The unbalanced Sun Authority Scepter could already do this. The Sun Authority Scepter, with all of its extraordinary characteristics balanced to the same level, would have even more terrifying simulation abilities and mental influence. Similarly, the Sun Authority Scepter in Tang's hand also had an extremely terrifying negative effect. Remaining uses until the next Sun Ascension, 21 times. Experimenting within the Euclidean space and killing marionettes to corrupt their shadows consumed many uses. But even with just this negative effect, if used well, tricking a king of angels wouldn't be impossible. For example, letting Amon steal this thing and then having the sun ascend at just the right time. But if it can be borrowed, the spiritual power consumed would probably be extremely terrifying. As for the other item, that book composed of thin brass pages, Tang felt that it was probably the uniqueness of the judge pathway. The Trunsost brass book. The uniqueness that has been polluted by the source, also called the Book of Rules after becoming a sealed artifact. If it were targeting Amon, he felt that this Book of Rules would be more useful. The power of the ancient scholar does not allow pulling out the historical projection of the uniqueness. The uniqueness is, as its name suggests, unique in itself. It is impossible for two identical uniquenesses to exist in this world, even if one is false or from the past. Similarly, the various kings of angels and gods who have accommodated the uniqueness cannot be pulled out of the historical void through normal ancient projections. But there are also bugs. Instead of pulling the uniqueness, pull out items related to the uniqueness. Instead of pulling the gods, pull out powers related to the gods. For example, the hidden angel, or a certain god's kingdom, or something like that. If you've seen the scene of Old Pigeon the tyrant thundering in the astral world, you might even be able to pull out Old Pigeon's lightning. Therefore, what he wanted to borrow was a portion of the rules promulgated by the Trunsost brass book, if there were any. History. With the chanting of ancient Hermes, the fog of history and the gaps in history unfolded once again. The past, present, and future overlapped in the Euclidean space, and countless scenes caused the gaps in history to become long and profound. Following the power of the charm, Tang once again arrived at that enormous, cold mausoleum. Gray fog covered the ground, and illusory rivers flowed slowly. Countless spirit threads were wrapped around the bizarre feathered serpent, extending to the dome above. The young man with his eyes closed sat on an invisible object, and this time he saw even more scenes. The uniqueness of the death pathway was bound together with half of his father's soul, which was also the reason why his father constantly continued as an undead, losing and regaining memories, and then involuntarily being attracted to this enormous mausoleum. The soul longed to be complete, and the death god's arrangement would cause his father's soul to be resurrected within him at the moment of unification. The enormous feathered serpent had undergone even more terrifying changes compared to the scenes Tang had seen before. The island-like feathered serpent had countless feathers with yellow grease growing all over its body. The spirit threads, which should have been illusory, were also stained with this bizarre color. They were dying, merging into the illusory river, becoming a part of it. The spirit threads were constantly dying, and constantly being awakened by some kind of power. The two sides in opposition were in a stalemate, and the enormous feathered serpent looked equally painful. Tang also understood what was happening here. It's grafting. It was a grafting of fate, a grafting of some abstract concept. The illusory river flowed continuously, and faintly, one could see a branch hidden deep within the spirit world through this river. A huge figure emerging above the branch. He had obvious southern continent features, but early on, white feathers stained with pale yellow grease grew from his body, filthy and terrifying. That was Pluto, Salinger. Or you could call him the previous death, his grandfather's predecessor. On the huge feathered serpent's body, a portion of fate was connected to the depths of the illusory river of eternal darkness, connected to that huge, rotten, bewildered figure that could never escape the river water. The grafting of fate caused a certain power on the uniqueness of the death pathway to continuously pour into the river of eternal darkness's tributary, and then quickly fall into death and slumber, eternally silent. Is this dealing with the tricks Salinger played on the death pathway's uniqueness? Through grafting, all of the revival backhands left by the death were stuffed back into the death's hands located within the river of eternal darkness, liberating the other half of the soul. Doing so would probably be equivalent to trying to kill his grandfather, stuffing his grandfather into a cold coffin, just preparing to dig him out one day to grind his bones to ashes, right?
Oh, this death wasn't a good bird either, then he could only say it was good riddance. The gaze of grandson Tang looked towards the huge feathered serpent.
Under the high-dimensional perspective of Euclidean space, the grafting of fate was traceable. The grafting power on the artificial death shaped by the uniqueness traveled within Euclidean space, grafting certain secrets into the river of eternal darkness, while the other half of Azik Eggers' soul was grafted onto the figure high above.
Tang looked up. A youth with an almost identical face to his own opened his eyes, looking down, as if looking at him.
Tang saw a phantom of a golden bird-shaped ornament hidden in the shadows beside the other person. The grafting of fate was precisely here. Looks like the future me can solve this problem. Seeming to notice Tang's gaze, the youth with a similar face slowly hid the bird-shaped golden ornament phantom behind him.
Tang watched the other himself hide that phantom behind him. Ah, this. Then, Tang saw himself half raise his hand.
A massive phantom spread out from his hand, and a book made of pages of brass emerged from the phantom.
Observing once again, Tang confirmed that it was the transused brass book.
The uniqueness of the judge pathway. In the next moment, the power of the talisman suddenly swelled before him. Countless parchments spread out from the brass book, filling this space, filling the historical void, blocking all the line of sight in front of him. Legal regulation. It is strictly forbidden to walk outdoors in this area from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Legal regulation. It is strictly forbidden for able-bodied people in the jurisdiction to be lazy and gain without working. Legal regulation. It is strictly forbidden to damage public property, and it is strictly forbidden to damage other people's property. Legal regulation. Students should study hard and should look like students.
Legal regulation. It is strictly forbidden to cosplay Sunny dolls.
Legal regulation. Wait, it seems like something strange got mixed in. Legal regulation. Any theft is prohibited in this area. That's it. Tang's eyes lit up slightly. Countless parchments presented various articles. These were all rules that the transused brass book had promulgated. It really is here, if with his own character, under the premise of obtaining the transused brass book and being able to influence it to a certain extent, he would definitely issue this kind of ban to suppress Amon. He went forward to prepare to take down that public notice to see the effect. In fact, he wanted to communicate with his future self. Obviously, he and his future self in this state could see each other. But time was running out. The power of the yesterday once more talisman was about to run out. The historical void was about to close. He could only wait for the next opportunity. Leverage, space, a vague voice came from above. Tang was stunned for a moment. Sequence 4, Demigod. Be careful of Amon. In the next moment, Tang's consciousness instantly returned. The historical void closed. The yesterday once more talisman was exhausted. And at the same time, a document appeared in his hand. That was a decree, a law that the transused brass book had once promulgated and publicized. Logically speaking, this kind of borrowed power would not last too long. The yesterday once more talisman made by the theater corps did not have a higher level prayer object after all, and the effect of the talisman made was not that good. But the parchment that should have disappeared along with the disappearance of the power of the yesterday once more talisman was now quietly lying in Tang's hand, without any abnormalities, and without revealing any peculiarities. Until the spirituality was exhausted, and Tang returned to the real world, this document still existed. Very strange energy. The system very sensibly threw an appraisal on it, but the feedback given was also a bunch of garbled characters. A higher level power was involved in the influence, causing the system's appraisal to fail. Tang sat in the high-backed chair, placed the document in front of the table, thought for a long time, and then opened the system interface to take a look before asking. What happened to those Abrahams? After he came back, he found that the speed of his potion progress had slowed down. It shouldn't be, he didn't kill those Abrahams, at most. After they climbed to the top of the building, they found that there was no way out, and when they were about to jump down, they were stunned by the theater core, and then stuffed back into the first floor, creating an illusion of, it was all a dream just now, and then experiencing the days of being chased by Slender Man, Sadako, and the red wedding dress. He didn't kill anyone, so why did his potion progress just stagnate?
I'll go take a look. The system's voice disappeared, and then the system's voice appeared again. Ah, host.
They seem to have given up. Tang. What's going on? Why did the sky suddenly fall? Crimson Campus. Inside room 404, the knocking on the door outside continued. But Charlie was sitting there with a dull expression, muttering something completely incomprehensible. Even hearing the pressing knocking and footsteps, he could no longer have more resonance. Edaz was lying on the ground, looking at the ceiling with empty eyes, his body still twitching strangely from time to time, as if proving that he was still alive. And the only female, Norma Abraham, leaned against the cabinet, looking down at her toes, humming a nursery rhyme, which was surprisingly consistent with the voice outside the door.
Sister carries a doll on her back. The doll wants to find its mother.
The eerie nursery rhyme was hummed from Norma's mouth and also came from outside the door, but the people present did not react to it. Olsen opened the door and walked in. Seeing the tragic situation in front of him, Olsen's lips moved slightly, but he didn't say anything after all. They certainly look quite frightened. Watching the few Abrahams lying on stretchers, being carried away by secret puppets to the school infirmary, Tang patted Orson on the back. What, do you think I was too harsh? Not at all. Orson said helplessly. Tang, have you always thought of me as some kind of bleeding heart? It should be, bleeding dick. Having principles is a good thing, but people like that, whether it's you or me, we can't possibly put them in important positions. Tang shrugged. Send them away. Without a definite way to block the full moon's whispers, sending the Abrahams away is no different from letting them climb back onto the guillotine, where the blade could fall at any moment.
Orson could only feel sorry for their misfortune and angry at their unwillingness to strive.
Everyone else has been settled down, Orson added, but I'm not sure if there will be anyone like Charlie among them. The entire Abraham family is no longer what it once was. Ever since their elder disappeared in the Four Emperors' War, and the full moon's whispers appeared, the Abraham family has also fallen apart internally.
There might be several such people, some hiding so deeply that they haven't been noticed yet.
Secret puppets are my eyes. Tang smiled. Besides, I've never taken them to heart. Naturally, there's even less talk of trust or friendship or anything like that. What he wants is the support of the Abraham family itself. As for the internal divisions within the Abraham family, that has nothing to do with him.
If they think they can snatch the never-ending theater from him, then they can come and try. Compared to those, without these Abrahams, the secret master's potion digestion progress will have to slow down again.
Returning to his office, Tang couldn't help but sigh. Lazy Abrahams, they're not good cattle at all. Currently, among Tang's secret puppets, the one following his father provides the most spiritual feedback daily. But because the Wraith secret puppet stays inside the gold coin for a long time and doesn't actively participate in theatrical performances, even though those chasing after his father are high-sequence beyonders, this spiritual feedback can't reach the high level of feedback you would get from personally participating in a play. The rest is piecemeal, from the secret puppet family in the castle, and from the Abrahams in the never-ending theater. These are all acting in daily life. The three Abrahams who were just mentally broken can be considered the people who have given him the most spiritual feedback through acting and participating in plays recently.
Should I go and capture a few Beyonders from the outside world and lock them up in the Crimson District? Watching his potion digestion progress about to break the 50 mark, Tang pondered this matter.
However, there's still an old man in the territory. It's better not to contact this old man before I advance to Sequence 4. Although he roughly knows from the original work that this angel has no malice and might even be on the side of good and justice, that's all in the distant future. Stereotypes can kill people, and Tang doesn't plan to cooperate with this thief pathway angel when he has no confidence. That would only lead to him being exploited completely, and then possibly losing his life. Besides, what if the other party intends to parasitize him? For parasites, Beyonders of the same pathway are the best, But the seer pathway is also on their menu. Will he watch the old man fight with the system then? I can remove viruses. Oh. The system began to show its presence, indicating that it was very useful. Sequence 2 of the thief pathway is called Trojan Horse of Fate. As everyone knows, a Trojan horse is a type of computer virus. That's old era knowledge. Tang complained, where does, as everyone knows, come from? If you ask the great emperor or Klein, maybe they'll know. Anyway, that's how it is. If there are parasites who are ignorant enough to dare to parasitize the host, he. System. Chilling smile JPG asterisk. Act normally. This thing really smiles like a villain. Which novel have you read too much of to make you smile like that? But that's true, systems and old men, who knows if their true forms are parasites or something. If that old man parasitizes him, maybe the system can give this angel a good disinfection. Thief pathway angel, can you steal you away? Tang asked.
Theoretically, no, the system said slowly. Oh, so it means it's possible. What would happen if you were stolen? Change the binding object, discover that the binding object is incorrect, obliterate, rebind the object. The system's innocent, electronic voice sounded.
Oh, so it's a personal exclusive system, and all other binding objects will be destroyed. Even if it can't be destroyed, it's estimated that the system can shake the main system, knowledge more, over, and then slap the wrongly bound object in the face with crazy knowledge. However, the system is bound to his spirit body, which can be seen from the fact that the other party has the effect of a suppressor. The thief pathway angel, Angel King Amon and others must have premonitions beyond ordinary people. Will the other party steal the system? Maybe he can dig a hole here, for example, disguise the system as one of his extraordinary abilities, and wait for the other party to steal it. Before facing Amon head-on, Tang must think of a solution. The worst possibility is really facing Amon, that future me in Euclidean space warned me.
Be careful of Amon. He's not sure if he will really face Amon, but he must deal with it according to the worst-case scenario.
Also, Sequence 4, once you reach the demigod level, can you leverage the power of Euclidean space itself? Putting the law borrowed from the future on the table, Tang leaned back in his high-backed chair, letting the mental fatigue sweep over his body. Potion digestion takes time. Advancing to Sequence 4 takes time.
Time, Amon and the old man really came at the wrong time. In a word, unlucky. 2 ticking time bombs. Please, can you let me be a maggot? He just wants to lie low and develop. He doesn't want to fight with these guys who are either Angel Kings or Sequence ones. It's still good to be a Malu, and then slap those Abrahams a few big fights. Lying on the table, closing the door, Tang made sure that there was no one else around except the secret puppets. Then first faced the sun outside through the floor-to-ceiling windows and cursed and howled like a ghost, relying on the barrier formed by the various powers of the theater, and madly opened the microphone with Amon centered on his mother and his ancestors as the radius. Then he didn't know where he took out a pillow and buried his head in the pillow, stood up holding the pillow and walked around the room, shaking his head and roaring. After venting and cursing to his heart's content, Tang walked out of the office refreshed and high-spirited, without the twisted, screaming, and crawling appearance he had just had. Sure enough, swallowing swear words makes the heart dirty, it's better to curse them out. Theater core, who had always been there. No, has this guy always been this crazy? Is he okay? Is he really okay? Is it really necessary to send him to a psychoanalyst to analyze his mental state? System. Just get used to it, people, they're all crazy, it's good to be crazy. Chapter 75, it's on the shelves. Today, this book has been decided to be put on the shelves. Thank you all for your support all along. As for updates, time is indeed not enough, I will try my best. Starting next month, it should be 4,000 plus words. Regarding becoming a god, I flipped through the outline, and it is tentatively set that the protagonist will become a god through dual pathways in the later stage, true god plus old days, not the Go-san family. At that time, the dual pathway true god will most likely be the more abstract kind, so please look forward to it, *omega. Regarding the system, knowledge wilderness is all to count,
A tool for calling people, there is no doubt about this. Regarding Miskatonic University. This university is about to start. Currently, specially invited professors. A certain sequence 1-time worm, Amon. A certain sequence 2 death Archon. A certain sequence 5 traveler. A certain Tong, crazy knowledge. Yes. A certain rotten sealed item, theater core smiley face, and so on.
Regarding the protagonist, just wants to be a maggot, rotten.jpg.
And then lay a foundation for the future mystics. Another morning arrived, and Tang was abruptly awakened. Outside the window, the sunlight was brilliant. The campus was already bustling with students heading to their 8 o'clock classes, filled with resentment as they made their way to the various academic buildings.
This resentment could probably sustain 10 evil sword immortals.
Under the manipulation of the theater core, everything happening within the eternally operating theater would approach reality. All the marionettes were lifelike. If one didn't know the truth, no one would suspect that the essence of this place was actually inside a sealed artifact. And as time passed, when this place generated a specific area in the spirit world, the ritual for Sequence 2 advancement in the seer pathway would be complete. Here, the spirit world was isolated, cutting off internal and external connections, making it safe enough. For a Sequence 5 marionettist, there was rarely any danger that could make him feel a premonition of unease. But the frantic throbbing of his spiritual intuition startled him. Had Amon entered? Or had Grandpa found his way here? Or had the Church of the Evernight finally discovered that he was developing stealthily here, and dispatched an archbishop to knock on his door and check his water meter? Tang quickly reacted. This frantic premonition of spiritual intuition didn't come from him, but from a distant area, from his marionette. What's going on, system? Tang, who had climbed out of bed, immediately got out of bed and looked out the window. Outside the window, the weather was beautiful and the sun was shining brightly, without a trace of being affected.
It's the marionette's side, the system's mechanical voice answered Tang's question. Host, there are some problems with the marionette on your father's side. Listening to the system's narration, Tang sensed his own spiritual threads. Following the seemingly boundless spiritual threads stretching into the distance, he quickly saw a scene through the marionette's eyes.
But in the next instant, Tang immediately put on his mosaic glasses for observing stars. There was pollution, and it was very strong pollution. The bionic marionette module allowed Tang to create a marionette that could be controlled remotely as long as the spirit world was not completely isolated. Marionettes equipped with the bionic marionette module were born with their own life, without needing the marionettist to continuously maintain this persona. For a marionettist, such a marionette didn't need to be specially manipulated at all, and could continuously receive spiritual feedback to assist in digesting the potion. Even if the marionettist lost consciousness and power, such a marionette could still act autonomously without orders, relying on the initiative given by the module. At the time, in order to make it convenient for his father to carry the marionette, Tang had specially chosen a vengeful spirit to put into a gold coin. For a marionettist, the value of a vengeful spirit marionette didn't need to be said. Everyone who had used one praised it.
And staying by his father's side, which attracted most of the church's firepower, under the Sequence 2 status and the extraordinary power as a death consul, those chasing him were most likely high-level members of the major churches, demigods. The Sequence 5 vengeful spirit really didn't have many opportunities to appear.
Tang didn't think that this vengeful spirit could do anything for his father. His original plan was that even if his father lost his memory again due to the death god's arrangement, before his father recalled his memory, that marionette would take good care of him. This was just insurance. He had never paid attention to the marionette's movements, but now, this insurance had been triggered autonomously. The marionette transmitted its own feelings to him through the spiritual threads in reverse. That was extreme fear, a subconscious and irresistible fear when facing irresistible power and extreme pollution, when facing the abyss.
Through the marionette's eyes, Tang saw a person. That was a man wearing a black hood, of medium build. Tang's expression instantly became extremely bad. Perhaps because of repeatedly entering the Euclidean space, even Tang, who was only Sequence 5 and had not yet advanced to demigod, had become mentally sensitive. His spiritual vision had become more acute, allowing him to vaguely see the other party's essence. With the assistance of the mosaic glasses, he could see something faintly floating behind the hooded man, and this thing was covered with a thick layer of mosaics. Mythical creature. Some angel. Or some god. Your Excellency, Death Consul, have you thought about my suggestion? Causing a pale disaster in Backland, I think that Death God might get some help from it. This is the Church of the Evernights Diocese. We can completely cooperate and give the goddess of the Evernight a great surprise, including those demigods chasing you, who can also be used as sacrifices for the ritual, isn't that right? The medium-sized man's deep voice seemed to carry extreme inducement, like the whispers of a demon, making people involuntarily follow his words and think further. Is it you? The system immediately followed the spiritual threads and threw an appraisal at the other side, and then the appraisal failed. Unknown factors interfere. But perhaps it was the system's own level, coupled with the previous upgrade, that even when appraising someone suspected of being a true god's vessel, the system still gave some feedback. Sequence 4. Devil. Demon. This appearance, this time, this sequence. Tang's expression became stern. Is it that apostle of desire from before? Has he advanced? Abyss pathway, huh? He's been in contact with it a lot recently.
There's still a demon marionette lying in the theater. And the one who pitted the Sequence 4 demon along with him, turning him into a marionette in the theater, was suspected to be the vessel for the descent of a god from the dark side of the universe, an apostle of desire of Sequence 5. That was the biggest demon he had come into contact with recently. Now this apostle of desire is missing, suspected to have left Tingen. He's in Backland, and preparing to cause a huge disaster in Backland? The dark side of the universe once issued a divine decree, requiring the blood sacrifice sect to perform a large number of blood sacrifices. My previous guess was that the dark side of the universe suspectedly wanted to use some kind of ritual to get rid of its current state of being polluted by some outer gods. Throwing down its polluted body, forcing other true gods to deal with these polluted things for it, in order to continue to linger and seek opportunities. I haven't heard of any bloody rituals caused by demon worship appearing nearby recently, but the information exchange in this era was originally not convenient enough. In places far enough away from Tingen, or in other countries, the followers of the blood sacrifice sect might have already succeeded? And this success also drove this apostle of desire, suspected of being a vessel for the descent of a god from the dark side of the universe, to advance, allowing the dark side of the universe to pour more power down? What does he want to do, planning to have a blood sacrifice in Backland as well, and why did he seek out his father? Because of Minghuang Solinger? Tang was eager to move, preparing to enter the Euclidean space and further observe this Sequence 4 demon. And the Death Consul, Azik Eggers, had a calm expression, seemingly unmoved. I don't think I have any need to cooperate with you, a cold voice rang out. Before Tang could react, upon hearing his father's words, a shrill laugh erupted from the marionette. The sound stirred emotions, even through the layer of the marionette. Tang felt his earlier anger swelling like a balloon. He was attacked. No, it was just a pure release of divine power. Google search TWKAN. Tang decisively wanted to sever the connection of the spirit threads controlling the Wraith marionette. As long as the bionic marionette module was present, severing the control of the spirit threads for a short time wouldn't be a problem, even if he wasn't a seer. Mid to high sequence beyonders of the Abyss pathway were all skilled at manipulating the emotions of others, leading them to corruption. When dealing with such fellows, one must maintain emotional stability and never allow the devil to find a weakness. For example, now, the marionette controlled by Tang himself was exposed due to the sudden surge of emotions, and the devil seized the opportunity. Marionettes should not have their own emotions or thoughts, but Tang was controlling this marionette, and he was the one affected. Ha 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 ha, Death Consul. A Death Consul actually pities these ants. Salinger truly chose the wrong person. No, he didn't choose wrong. The sharp laughter suddenly disappeared, like a death serpent hiding its fangs. The chilling sensation made one's scalp tingle even through the marionette. The devil looked at the bronze-skinned man in front of him, indifferent yet high above, like a god. I underestimated him. Oh, a marionette? A meander of the seer pathway can actually hide a marionette next to the death console? You value him greatly. Who is he? Your friend? Your relative? Or your child? Salinger indeed acted unkindly, splitting the soul of his child, to bear a portion of his resurrection's contingency plan. But the mad ravings seemed to assault him along with the other party's language, through the marionette's hearing and into Tang's ears. That was mental pollution. It was too late. The system's warning sounded. Tang closed his eyes, preparing his spirit to leave his body and ascend to resist the pollution. Relying on his own high sequence, in the state of spirit, even without obtaining divinity, Tang had a certain resistance to pollution below his own sequence, not to the point of madness, nor to the point of being on the verge of losing control. And this kind of pollution spreading from the spirit threads was not much, but it all originated from an extraordinary source of pollution. A vessel for God's descent, this was not a power a devil should possess, but something that belonged to a true God, to the true abyss. A God so mad beyond imagination, he poured down more power than imagined. But his sequence was higher than these pollutions. At this moment, a hand reached in from outside his pocket, grabbing the gold coin hidden inside his coat pocket. Just as he was about to leave his body to resist the pollution with his spirit, Tang felt a powerful force envelop the gold coin, obscuring all sounds and all visions. Even the pollution that should have surged along the spirit threads fell into dead silence, into slumber. That devil's power no longer appeared, and all the senses on the marionette's side were blocked by his father. The gold coin was covered. Azik Eggers took his hand out of his pocket and stretched it out, palm up, as if holding something. Light appeared on his hand. It was a dim, decaying light. Countless rays of light twisted into a group, erupting one after another. Everything around, anything stained with that dim light, was decaying, rotting, entering the final end of living beings. Flowers would wither, living beings would die, even existence itself, under the guidance of this light, uncontrollably fell into the bottomless river of nothingness, falling into the eternal slumber of death. At this moment, the netherworld and the spirit world, countless rich tones erupted one after another. The netherworld actually descended into the real world for a moment. It would guide the dead, allowing all spiritual beings around to break free from the shackles of their bodies and go to the land of the dead. Sequence 2 of the Death Pathway, the Death Consul who once ruled the Bayam Empire, the child of Ming Huang Salinger, he himself represented the absolute power of this pathway. Standing in the depths of overlapping rich colors, Azik Eggers looked at the devil not far away and raised his hand again. The devil raised his head. Traces of decay had already appeared on his face, and countless feathers with yellow stains grew from the rotten wounds. A Sequence 2 who had recovered all his memories was not something a vessel for God's descent, a mere Sequence 4 devil, could defile. Under the gaze of brown, indifferent eyes, his body rapidly expanded, as if trying to escape. Azik Eggers tightened his hand, holding the group of light symbolizing decay and death. The light swept past rapidly, and wherever it passed, everything would wither. Tang stood in front of the French window for a long time. There was no movement from the marionette, and Tang could not control the spirit threads there. The spirit world was shielded, distorted by a more powerful force, and the bionic marionette module could not successfully connect him to the marionette over there to observe the situation. Tang looked at the early morning college students outside the window and sat down in his chair, exhaling a long breath. After a long time, new movements finally came from the marionette. It's all right now. When the spirit world reappeared and the marionette could be controlled, Tang instantly manipulated the wraith marionette, allowing it to come out of the gold coin. He had just consulted the system to confirm that the system could also send something to the marionette through the spirit threads, so Tang was prepared that if one was not enough, he would first use up the remaining uses of the Sun Divine Scepter and then send the Sun Divine Scepter over to give that devil a big one. The pollution of the Chaos Sea would rise, even if Tongzi said that each subsequent rise of the sun would not be as strong as the first time. The pollution itself could severely damage that devil. Cosmic dark side, you are so idle. Then let's have another pollution. Anyway, it doesn't matter if I have more deaths. Maybe I can turn misfortune into good fortune, right? But looking at the situation, it was much better than he thought. At least it didn't come to the point where he was holding the sun divine scepter and cracking the devil's head. Azik was sitting in a small room, the bright yellow candlelight illuminating the room. There were no windows here, and the air was filled with the damp and musty smell unique to basements. His father seemed to have just arrived here through the spirit world. Tang looked around, not seeing the devil, nor discovering any large-scale death scenes or anything. "He's already gone," Azik said in a low voice. "You're being very reckless, Tang." Azik was referring to Tang's manipulation of the spirit threads, which awakened this marionette. Previously, the marionette had been quietly staying inside the gold coin, and then suddenly popped its head out to look. Azik suddenly felt a headache coming on. As an angel of the death pathway, Azik was also clear about the limits of a marionette master's ability to control marionettes, and he knew that facing a demigod of the abyss pathway, being contaminated would almost certainly lead to madness for a mid-sequence Beander. Even if you have some confidence, some way to resist the contamination, don't do this kind of thing again. As a Sequence 2 angel of the death pathway, Azik understood that if the contamination had spread along the spirit threads, it would have been a devastating blow to a Sequence 5. Even though Tang had certain secrets and didn't seem like someone who would do something without assurance, Azik still felt it was very risky. Tang gave an awkward but polite smile, manipulating the marionette to look left and right, preparing to change the subject. This topic seemed too heavy, and he felt like he was about to be lectured again. System. Host, what's this called? Loving deeply means criticizing harshly, he. Your knowledge wasteland. Standing in front of the French window, Tang resentfully communicated with his own system. Don't mention that for now, quickly go research and see if you can send some kind of subsystem to the marionette. That way, he wouldn't be contaminated in the face the moment he started, almost being reverse contaminated by that god's descent. Could Tang say that he had only just realized that he had been tricked by his own marionette? The bionic marionette module gave the marionette great initiative. The marionette master did not need to manipulate the spirit threads at all times, and by extension, he did not need to deal with the various problems on the marionette's side that might affect it at all times. This was the drawback of the bionic marionette module. Ordinary marionettes do not have corresponding autonomy and initiative, and need the marionette master to control them at all times. Therefore, for the marionette master, this kind of marionette is the best. The marionette equipped with the bionic marionette module was the opposite. The marionette side had such a big commotion, producing such a big emotional fluctuation, and even reflecting back through the spirit threads. How could he possibly ignore the problem there? And as soon as he took control, Tang, unaware of the specific situation, immediately ran into the muzzle of the gun. Although his spiritual intuition didn't feel any problem before connecting to the marionette, he couldn't immediately check the situation there, and the system wasn't on the marionette's side either, so he couldn't just throw a few appraisals to see the situation first. He was tricked this time, but it wasn't a big problem. Being by the side of a death console, his own safety was obviously guaranteed. In addition, with the high position of the spirit and the system with the power of a demigod, if he had this configuration and still didn't dare to come over and take a look, he might as well just be a maggot in his own castle. To ask is, would he dare next time? However, Dad, your future student is even more troublesome than me. Caterpillar. Help JPG. Tang's wandering gaze shifted back, looking at his dad, and suddenly became matter of fact, plus a little bit of pity. Azik. He was both annoyed and amused, but ultimately didn't lecture him about it anymore. Father, are we still in Backland? Tang had just heard the two of them talking, and it seemed that the god's descent vessel wanted to cause a large-scale ritual in Backland, in order to respond to the cosmos' dark side or the god of death. Yes. Azik nodded. It's a pity he escaped. However, even if he escaped, the commotion just now has attracted the attention of the Backland church members. The Nighthawks and the Stormwind churches beyonders have an unimaginable influence in Backland. Even a vessel for a god's descent wouldn't easily expose themselves here, because that could very likely cause the descent of other gods. Azik didn't mention the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. The God of Steam and Machinery's hasty advancement to Sequence 0 ultimately caused problems with his state. This hasty advancement also affected the spread of his believers' faith in Loen. After all, there were only so many anchors, and who had more or less was somewhat related to the god's state and strength. The spread of the god of steam and machinery's faith was undoubtedly not smooth in Loen. Therefore, the god of steam and machinery's influence in Backland could not reach the level of the other two. He really is a vessel for the descent from the cosmos' dark side. Tang confirmed this point with his father, and then asked, "What exactly are that evil god's plans? Father, does he want to rely on creating a large-scale disaster in Backland to allow his main body to descend?" Azik chuckled, "Don't worry, the archbishops of the major churches, those agents of the gods on earth, won't let that happen. Backland isn't very stable now. The East Borough has been divided, gathering a large number of vagrants and many people who have fled from other places. Even so, if the cosmos' dark side wants to carry out a ritual, killing enough people, under the circumstances that it has already attracted the attention of the Backland Church, it will still be difficult for him to do so. It's even more impossible to cause a massacre in Backland. Especially the still chaotic East Borough. Heaven knows how many Beyonders are inside. The churches are dragging troublemakers back to the churches in droves. As long as that God's descent vessel dares to act, the next moment, the saints and angels of the major churches will besiege him. As long as they don't have problems in their heads, they won't touch the churches, browse at this time. After all, the original intention of the cosmos' dark side was to find other gods to help deal with the contamination, not to let other gods kill him along with the contamination. Of course, if you add an angel of the death pathway. Azek's words gave Tang a shot in the arm. After all, he remembered a major disaster in the original book. The Backland smog event. That was a truly terrifying disaster with corpses lying everywhere. Perhaps, I should find some time to go to Backland to take a look. Tang pondered. After all, Backland is the core of Loen, equivalent to the capital. There are many dangers and many opportunities in this kind of place. If you want to develop your own hidden organization, Backland is obviously unavoidable. He remembered that his mother's relatives had some influence in Backland, especially since his family also had a relative by marriage from East Chester County named Hall. How can this not be said to be fate? However, there is no plan for such a long future for the time being. Tang seized the time and took advantage of this opportunity to tell his father about Amon. He also wanted to ask if his father had any good solutions. Azik frowned, and said seriously, "He is very dangerous, it is best not to get close, especially Beyonders of the seer, apprentice, and thief pathways. When you see Amon, the best way is to stay away." Angel of the King Amon, if one appears in Tingen, it means that a group of Amons has already been stationed nearby. This is not a good sign. Speaking of this, Azik frowned again. Amon discovered you. The one who came to Tingen is likely just Amon's avatar. If that's the case, before he loses his memory again, he can still find a way to banish it. No, probably not, Tang said. He hadn't been in close contact with Amon, observing him entirely through Euclidean space. The existence of Euclidean space itself clearly exceeds their current dimension. Although it's impossible to determine the essence of Euclidean space, whether it's a source, or something like a kingdom of gods, Amon's avatar impales Zoroaster, a sequence 1, obviously haven't noticed. Azik pondered for a moment, then said, Amon appearing in Tingen might be attracted by something. If possible, come to Backland, Constant, and other major cities with church forces stationed there. In those places, Amon wouldn't dare to mess around. This is the Fourth Epoch, when gods walk the earth. Amon has no reason to send his main body to these places, only to be equally blasted away by all the gods. After all, Amon and the dark side of the universe are not much different in the eyes of the orthodox churches. As for avatars, dealing with them is much simpler than dealing with the main body. The only question is whether this Amon avatar staying in Tingen is being used by Amon as bait. Tang chuckled. Who said it wasn't? He previously thought it was the never-ending theater. But this sealed artifact from the seer pathway, sequence 2, has the dual influence of the night pathway's secretive power and the system's mad knowledge. This sealed artifact from the miracle invoker might not attract Amon. With Pale's Zoroaster here, Amon most likely won't give up the sequence 1 potion he has in hand. Unless he drives away the old man, Amon will eventually come looking for him, to clash with the old man and him. I always feel that the God-descended container has no good intentions. Coming to find Father this time is probably also with some bad idea in mind. Regaining consciousness, Tang asked the system, do you think I should try to locate that demon's position through Euclidean space? You can try, but there aren't many yesterday reappearance charms left, host. Currently, the range that Tang can observe with Euclidean space is limited to Tingen. This might be related to his spirituality and divinity. After advancing to sequence 4, Trick Magician, it might change. Even if he cheated the system's rules and opened Euclidean space in advance, he could try to expand the observation range and look at Backland from Tingen. But entering Euclidean space consumes spirituality very quickly. Without reaching sequence 4 and without a constant supply of yesterday reappearance charms to borrow spirituality, he's not sure what he can probe out. Should he just go to Backland? The observation points in Euclidean space seem to vary depending on the location he enters. That is, standing in Tingen can only observe Tingen, while standing in Backland can observe Backland. With the traveler's secret puppet, distance won't be a problem. But the problem is that God Descender in Backland? If not, going would be a waste of time. However, even if he doesn't go to Backland now and can't confirm the other party's position, besides Euclidean space, Tang has something else. Telescope for observing stars. This system-exclusive item from the surprise package is equivalent to a weakened version of Euclidean space. Tang has tested it, and the range seen through this is smaller than Euclidean space itself, but the distance can be pulled very far, even if he's not in Tingen City. However, the distance and the consumption of spirituality are directly proportional, which is still Tang's fatal weakness. Helpless, this can only be temporarily abandoned. In the end, spirituality is the weakness. As for Amon's problem, this guy is really difficult to deal with. Even if he cooperates with Grandpa Pales, they might not be able to make things develop according to their ideas. After all, Amon is good at deception. Who knows if you're fishing him or he's fishing you? If he's not careful, Amon's main body might suddenly descend when clearing out Amon, and he and the old man would probably be finished. And the old man, this matter should be put aside for now. He needs to have confidence to cooperate, and without a trump card to show, the other party will most likely just treat him as a joke. At least he has to advance to sequence 4. At that time, he will gain divinity, his spirituality will be strengthened, and he can also split out spirit worms to let the theater core make charms. Sequence 4, worried JPG. Host, how about throwing those Abraham guys in again? Those Abraham guys woke up. Tang was a little surprised. Their condition isn't very good, the system said. The Abrahams who wanted to betray him were thrown into the Crimson District, and each of them was so frightened that they showed signs of losing control. They are currently being well taken care of by the psychiatrists in the school infirmary. They shouldn't be of use in the short term. Tang thought about it and decided to forget it. To be honest, speeding up potion digestion, apart from playing a big game, the speed of daily acting is not too fast. These sequence 5 Abrahams are an unexpected gain, but after all, he has to consider some of the Abraham family's reputation and can't really kill them. So, if you want to quickly digest the potion, you can only take the initiative to act and digest it better. Should I recruit students first? But Tingen can't be touched for now. He was afraid that Amon would silently slip into the school along with those Beyonders. Then it would be Miskatonic Amon University. Let's pilot it in our own territory first, and then make adjustments, but the focus should still be on digesting the potion. Just then, the system suddenly said, "Host, there's a messenger looking for you." Messenger. Tang was stunned, and a female traveler's secret puppet appeared beside him. The puppet reached out and grabbed Tang's shoulder, and the two entered the spirit world and returned to the castle in the real world. Unlike Ol Sun's octopus messenger, the messenger in front of him was a horse-shaped skeleton with a few pieces of half-rotten meat hanging all over its body. Its skeleton was very large, and black flames flickered at the hooves. If the muscles and skin were still there, this should be a very good-looking horse. But in its current state, it looks like the kind that would scare children. The skeleton horse held the letter in its mouth, and after placing it in Tang's hand, Its whole body burst into flames, and then it disappeared into the real world and returned to the spirit world.
This is Owen's messenger. It's really hard for him to find this kind of messenger. Tang muttered as he opened the letter. Skipping those nonsense words, those flying and dancing characters that he couldn't tell what they were, and skipping the meaningless greetings, the central idea of Owen's letter was,
"How are you doing lately? I'm fine, don't bother me, ha 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 ha."
The system's mechanical voice was melodious, especially in the last few words, the voice rising and falling like a great bell.
It's clear that he's good at extracting nonsense.
Tang, a small knife cutting your butt. Have you learned all the words? Have you finished school? Is your head cracked open, Owen? Facts prove that when people are speechless to the extreme, they will really laugh.
Tang refolded the letter full of nonsense, stuffed it into the warehouse, and then the traveler marionette took him away from the castle.
The Lamotte family marionettes in the castle are still conscientiously doing their job. The marionettes dispatched by the never-ending theater using the Ring of the Master are still controlled by the never-ending theater, and the act of disguising as them is also part of Tang's seer potion digestion. With the Ring of the Master, and an entire theater as his marionettes, even without actively acting, the seer potion digestion is progressing steadily. However, since the actual controller of these marionettes is the theater core, most of the spiritual feedback from digestion will go to the theater core. He is only benefiting from the Ring of the Master to get a little spiritual feedback. Otherwise, after Tang obtained the never-ending theater, he could just stuff a few Beyonders into it, and based on the amount of marionettes controlled by the theater core, he could complete the seer potion digestion in less than a day. After all, the number of marionettes and the level of familiarity that a Sequence 2 can control are far beyond what a Sequence 5 seer can participate in. Moreover, when I advance to Sequence 4, if there are no spectators around, I must sever the connection between the theater and me, so I won't be able to use the Ring of the Master to control the never-ending theater to participate in the battle to hunt Sequence 4. Having a Sequence 2 Miracle Invoker sealed artifact controlling a group of marionettes as spectators, although not as terrifying as Klein Moretti's bunch of angels, is enough for him to satisfy the ritual and advance to Trickmaster. As for acting, I can't send the marionettes out yet. There's an old man in the territory. Who knows if he'll discover the problem and then find the theater along the marionette line. In fact, at this time, Tang even intends to recall the marionette Tang from the castle.
None of the angels are simple. Even if the system and the power of the night have embellished it a bit, with the spirit threads floating outside, it's hard to say whether it will be discovered.
What if an old man comes to his door later and asks him, "Did you forget your marionette outside?" And then he happily opens the door to thank this old man who returned the lost item. The old man who returned the lost item brought you a marionette, and then the old man took out a monocle and gave you a brilliant smile. Oh, what a dark joke. Tang amused himself, then restrained his expression, returned to the theater, and continued his work.
The system and the theater core are watching the castle, and the system and the theater core will immediately warn if there is a problem, so there will be no problems for the time being.
Now he is formulating the relevant school rules of Miskatonic University, preparing to complete a side quest.
Side quest. Establish a secret organization, Phase 2.
You have already selected a fixed location for communication. Let me see, what? You actually chose a sealed artifact. This is truly a bold decision. Oh, my friend, your courage is commendable, and your friends are equally respectable. Then, after establishing the prototype of a secret organization, you should formulate corresponding rules and regulations. Well, you understand, a secret organization without rules and regulations is like mysticism without Dawood T. Morrison. You ask who Dawood T. Morrison is. Oh, that's just an ordinary tramp.
Please establish complete rules and regulations for the secret organization. Task progress. 71%, task reward. Surprise gift pack *1.
Currently, there is no requirement for active acting. Activities in Tingen are dangerous, and Eamon and the old man are still quite calm. The problems on the dark side of the universe are even more urgent. He can only see for himself if he can find another way out.
The first surprise gift pack opened a telescope for observing stars. What will the next surprise gift pack open?
Although he thinks that this thing should be controlled by the knowledge more, a surprise gift pack with everything. It's just that the knowledge more is coordinating the data and stuffing him with a golden finger.
He'll just take whatever the knowledge more gives him, what else can he say?
Host, don't say that. Our algorithm is very people-friendly and there is absolutely no behind-the-scenes manipulation. Really? I don't believe it. Tang asked gently, System, could it be that you can really open up the corpse of an ancient god for me to use as a marionette? Single quote. Well, it's not impossible. The system choked for a moment, and said weakly, I'll go discuss it with the main system. Ah no, I'll go ask the main system, there should be some over there. Well, go throw a tantrum, say you won't live if they don't give it to you, and then take a look at what good things are on the main system, and then upgrade yourself to become a rich and handsome system, leading the host to beat up Amon and kick the old man, and reach the pinnacle of system life. Inexplicably a little tempted JPG. Then, go quickly and come back quickly.
After speaking, Tang ignored the system's little thoughts. Anyway, whether it's the observing stars set or anything else, he'll always have a time when he can use it.
Now he needs to specifically revise the rules he has formulated.
In the office with a unique shape, modern-style decorations mixed with medieval style, Tang sat in a high-backed chair, holding parchment, and using a charcoal pencil in his right hand to write and draw on the lines of text above that had obviously been modified many times. School rules, picking and choosing. Most of the rules can be recalled according to the memories of the previous life, through dream divination.
So many people perfected this part of the content in the previous life, he doesn't need to consider it himself, he can just borrow it and make some modifications to use it separately.
What he is considering now is the problem between the outer and inner school districts.
The rules of the outer school district are naturally simple: strive to be a good student in the new era, study hard and make progress every day, and don't be late or leave early or anything. The rules of the inner school district tend to be not to harm people, not to grow mushrooms with companions, not to recite mysterious content such as True Creator, Amon, or Adam, and then there are daily norms.
Both of these are easy to solve. The rules of the outer school district are normal, the rules of the inner school district are mysterious. As for the Crimson School District, haha, it's full of spiritual pollution. Just know one rule when you go in. Resist desperately to survive.
The rules for entering the inner school district from the outer school district, should I write them in the school rules? Or wait for people to discover them, like a rule-based horror story? For example, write a sentence, there is no fourth floor in the library, if you encounter stairs leading to the fourth floor, please don't enter.
This is quite rule-based horror, and rule-based horror is also quite trickmaster. Tang gently tapped the table with his fingertips, put down the parchment in his hand, and took out a stack of sticky notes from the drawer. Let's call it Miskatonic Rule-Based Horror University. It sounds better than Amon University.